to ask you to move forward with the mixed income cross-subsidized social housing project that has been proposed in this bond package. Housing affordability was a primary theme that emerged from the public surveys done at the beginning of this bond process. And this specific project has been supported by numerous members of the public, myself, and others that have spoken in this venue or responded to those surveys. It's supported by members of the City Council. It is also included in the current 6-year capital investment plan. This project would seed a revolving fund to catalyze social housing construction over the 6-year bond period and ultimately for generations to come. The social housing model, which has been employed successfully in communities all over the country, would supply permanently affordable housing to people across the socioeconomic spectrum, providing a more equitable and sustainable alternative to market rate housing. The cost of housing is an existential crisis for too many in our community. The homeless population in our city has nearly doubled in the past decade. Half of renters in Denver are top. With the federal government in full retreat, it is incumbent on you and me as citizens and our city leaders, this community, to fill that gap and address the big challenges ailing our city. So please include social housing in the final list of bond projects to ensure a more vibrant city for all Denverites. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Amy Campbell. Amy Campbell. Jacob Wooden. Good morning. My former partner in crime.
Hey, good morning. Thank you for your time. I'm Nate Hunsinger, longtime resident of Denver. I'm here to speak about the importance of taking care of what we have already in our city. I grew up in Denver. I went to Brown, went to Skinner, went to North. I went to CU Denver. I actually started my career when Secretary Payne was in office as the mayor. Started as when I was 22 years old. For my 30 years with the city, I worked for every agency what was previously known as Public Works, but is now known as DOTI, except for solid waste. Over my last 8 years with the city, I was the director of capital projects, where I have 4 divisions reporting to me: transportation, wastewater, facilities, and National Western Center. Through my work, I've probably seen every square foot of the city. When I saw the bond announcement, I was excited. The potential for communities to receive the investments they deserve, fulfill promises the city has made, and more importantly, the hope that infrastructure would get a thoughtful consideration. After reviewing the tiered project list from the subcommittees, I saw a large number of deserving projects across all categories. A common thread connecting all of the projects: infrastructure. Specific examples: a new West Side clinic for Denver Health is a much needed investment. But if pedestrian signals are broken or poorly timed, and the crosswalks are faded or missing, some of the city's most valuable, vulnerable residents, those who rely on walking, wheelchairs, and transit, may not be able to safely access those facilities. A renovation of the Symphony is exciting and culturally important, but failing or load-restricted bridges disrupt the daily lives of thousands more people and pose a far greater safety and mobility risk. Housing, parks, and libraries are essential to a healthy, thriving community, but none of them can truly function without a reliable infrastructure foundation. With the work at the city, I know the definition state of good repair. Roads, bridges, signals are not wants, they are needs. I'm not here to argue for a fixed percentage for bond infrastructure. I'm just here to simply recognize infrastructure is the thread that connects all of the projects on that list. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Peter Hines. Peter Hines. Valeraya Big Eagle. The Honorable Rafael Espinoza. Drew Dutcher. It's a good thing we're not a baseball team. Jacob Decker. Penfield.
Good morning, committee members. Thank you. My name is Penfield Tate. I'm a longtime resident of Park Hill in Denver, and I appear before you today to ask you to support a project that will maintain the city's ethic and the city's history of being the city in a park. For the last 8+ years, many residents around the city have advocated for, fought for, and supported the setback of the former Park Hill Golf Course and maintaining it as a city park. I know the subcommittee did not place it high on its list, but I ask that you support the request of the Parks Department and include the Park Hill Golf Course as one of the projects to be funded through the Vibrant Bond process. The fact that it has been supported overwhelmingly citywide on 3 ballot questions over the last 8 years shows the deep level of support and commitment to this project. But in addition, I would offer to you that the Park Hill Golf Course redevelopment supports the goals that are on your website of community needs and benefit, community equity, economic impacts, health, safety, and environmental impacts, and project readiness. It is bare ground, it is ready to be developed, and I think the environmental and societal impacts cannot be disputed. Denver voters have wanted this, they have supported it. The mayor and city council have done their part in pushing forward with the city's ultimate acquisition of the site and dedicating it as a park. But now it's time to activate that land and to visibly show people that the city is following through on its commitment and turning it into open space and recreation consistent with the desires of the broader community. That process of community engagement has already begun. We at Save Open Space Denver support it, but we need the funding to activate the project. We're concerned that if it is not included in this bond project, it may be 4 to 6 years before funding is found or devoted to activate the land. It would be a shame to acquire it and let it to continue to sit in disrepair as the prior owner did since the loss in the 20 election. Thank you so much for your time. Again, I ask for support for the development of the former Park Hill Golf Course.
Thank you, sir. Jenna Everett. Jenna, you're on mute.
Possible to have them.
Okay, thank you for letting me speak. Denver is facing a housing crisis, a shortage of affordable housing, rising costs. 3/4 of renters are spending more than 50% of their income on housing, of rising homelessness and rising eviction rates. One important strategy to address this crisis is social housing. Housing that is permanently affordable, mixed income, with no tenant spending more than 30% of their income on rent, and with democratic resident control. I recommend that Vibrant Denver bonds be used to establish a $100 million social housing revolving fund to finance the capital construction of new housing units citywide. Many U.S. cities such as Austin, San Francisco, and Los Angeles have used GO bonds for building affordable housing, and I ask Denver to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. Shanta Harrison Sullivan. Shanta Harrison Sullivan. Keith Roberts. Peter Lowy.
I yield back to people who've already talked about social housing.
Thank you, Peter. Alejandra Castaneda. Sue Powers. All right, I'm gonna go through these list one more time. quickly. Sarah Ford. Amy Campbell. David Wooden. Peter Hines. Valeria Big Eagle. Rafael Espinoza. Drew Dutcher. Jacob Decker. Shanta Harrison Sullivan. Keith Roberts. And Sue Powers. Okay, that concludes the public comment period of this morning's meeting. We're going to move along to a review of a mapping tool that I think Jackson's going to show us. All right, great.
Awesome. Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us once again for another executive committee meeting. Appreciate everyone for joining and participating. So yeah, I think just really quickly to get into the agenda of what we're discussing today, a couple of items for our agenda. We wanted to first talk through really some resources that can be available to this committee, notably our mapping tool. And then just wanted to preview, we do have a few information on project updates, additional reinvestment information, and then really we wanted to walk through the menu of options that we promised you all on Tuesday and really staff's approach for working through the complex and nuanced citywide program. So I'm actually going to go ahead and turn it over to Emily to talk a little bit through our mapping tool, and I'll go ahead and pull it up on our screens to get us working with that.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Emily Marcus. I'm on Jackson's capital team. So this map is a dynamic map that shows all of the projects we currently have in consideration and in the parking lot.
Give me 1 second.
Yep. There it is. So it has a bunch of filters on it that we can use. We can filter it down to council district, what tier the subcommittee put projects in, if you want to look at just your in consideration or parking lot, and then it also has investment type. I know the new versus reinvestment has been a very large discussion, so we wanted to make sure to pull that in so you can see it. But most importantly, this is just a visual tool so you can see where the projects are throughout the city. Once you zoom in a little bit, you can see where the different neighborhoods are as well, and then it's color coded for the different groupings or subcommittees. If you hover over a little dot, it will give you the project name and then the subcommittee. Usually that works, you might have to, or
Give us a quick refresh.
Yeah.
Yeah, apologies.
We were making some changes this week to make sure it was all accurate. But also if you click on it, then it will give you a brief description of the project as well that you guys have already seen.
There it is.
Yep.
Apologies here.
And then you can also filter down to the specific project. So all the information, none of this information is necessarily new. It's just a different way to present it and view it. And we thought that that could be very useful in how you are looking through and deciding on these projects.
Is this in our executive committee
No.
resources?
Not yet. This is something that we just recently developed
Oh, okay.
and we'll be working on getting you guys access to. Great.
And are these the scaled ones or are these the ones that we have on build your own bond tool?
These are all the ones on Build-A-Bonds for just the in consideration of the parking lot, anything that you've removed we're not seeing just so as not to muddy the waters. And then the citywide are listed there, but because they are citywide, it's a little bit hard to pinpoint where they are on the map.
And if we want to bring something back that's not in consideration, you can easily add it.
We'll be able to add it on the back end, absolutely. Yep.
Well done, bravo. I'm always
And,
impressed
yeah.
with what you guys can do.
As we go through our conversations, if we want to pull this up at any time, we'll have it up. So happy to kind of reference back and continue to use the tool for our conversations and anything else y'all need.
Any questions about the map?
One more question. So if it's like a whole entire corridor, like 38th Avenue, where would you push, where is like on my council district? not the 38th Avenue underpass.
Oh, sorry.
That's Councilman Watson's. So if it's like a long corridor.
I think for the long corridors, that might have been, I'd have to look specifically. Some of them, if they were crossing multiple districts,
It's not, it's in Council District 1. Okay, so it's like you just placed it wherever along that corridor.
well, just
Yeah, I think we can also, want to comment?
I think it might just need to be needed.
Yeah, I think we're still refining this as it goes along. I think if we can also add some specific parameters on mapping. Generally, you can do that in GIS and Power BI tools. So that's probably a level of nuance worth adding into this. So that's well noted, but this does show as a project on 38th Ave in District 1. But yeah, probably worth adding a little of those spatial parameters.
Is in the plan that the recommendation from Dottie on this, there's no plan for bus rapid transit. And it keeps saying that in there. So I don't understand where the mix-up is. There's no plan for let me repeat. There's no plan for bus rapid transit. It got nixed. It was a study to see if we were gonna have it in Northwest Denver or not. But the final recommendation that was just presented to my community about 6 weeks ago, that they had like the boards and everything, there's no bus rapid transit. So I just wanna make sure that as we're presenting this to the public, that the project scopes are correct, because there's a couple project scopes that are off.
And that's Council President, that's a great flag, and that is, we can absolutely, as we move through this process, we will refine those, especially as we learn about all of that step 2. So we'll absolutely make that correction here on this project description.
Thank you.
And as you see any other project descriptions that need to be altered or amended or in any way, happy to make those adjustments.
One last nuance. For corridors like this, in the project description, can we say that it would go from Inca all the way to Sheridan and give like an approximate mileage count? I think that helps in factoring in how big of an impact this is, right? Because this spans, for me, this spans my entire council district from Fox to Sheridan, and it spans 4 neighborhoods, so it would be a huge impact. I think that would help the committee, because in the committee, everyone might not know all of those in the weeds details. Especially for those corridors, right? Thank you. Bravo. This is great.
Any other questions or comments about the map? Let's move along.
All right. Second, you're going back and forth between a couple things here. Great. So yeah, that is our quick review of the map. What we wanted to talk about now is really a few changes, some updates, and kind of continuing the theme of some additional resources for you all. So just keeping you all in the loop as we continue to work through this process. So the first thing I did want to have a specific call out for you all on. Appreciate some of the comments about reinvestments in infrastructure. You will see we continue to refresh our Build-A-Bond tool. The Build-A-Bond tool that is available will include one additional standalone project. That is the Smith and Sandown Bridge Replacement Project. This was a really important agency priority. You all heard Amy Ford discuss this project when executive directors came in a couple meetings ago. And so this is one that it didn't necessarily get a specific flag from the community. Some of our other bridge projects did, Lincoln, 6th Avenue, 8th Avenue. We did hear from those in the community. Obviously, those are really critical bridges for us. There is a certain sense of criticality for this bridge. We have some information that we'll share here just in a moment. And so this really does allow our 3 most critical bridges to all be listed in our standalone projects list. It is a really quick, I'll defer to Patrick and the team for additional information, but it's a $35 million bridge replacement project in District 8 along Quebec Boulevard. So Smith and Sandown both span over Quebec Boulevard. It is also in the same corridor as the Quebec over Airlawn project. So Quebec goes under Smith and Sandown and over Airlawn on that corridor in District 8. We also, our Dottie's Bridge team gave a presentation to the South Platte River Committee yesterday. And so Wednesday, yes, I'm sorry. It's been one of those weeks, I apologize.
Yesterday I wasn't in committee.
It was Wednesday, yes, thank you, really appreciate that. So yeah, they gave that on Wednesday, and we're gonna make sure that we share that slide deck with you all shortly. The other thing I did want to mention, just for additional resources that have been provided to you all, Evan did share a resource with you all in his email yesterday, on Thursday, for Denver Public Libraries, really listed prioritizations. There's a variety of library projects that we're considering.
Real quick before we go to DPL, what are the other two critical bridges?
Yeah, from a criticality reinvestment standpoint, those are the Lincoln and 6th Avenue bridges, as well as the Quebec and Airlawn
On the news
project.
last night.
Yeah, I got
Yeah.
on the news last night.
Yeah.
What's the last one?
Quebec over Airlawn. So those are
Lincoln,
three
Quebec.
kind of project groupings that are all included for you all. So Smith and Sandown, that is a grouping of 2 bridges. Lincoln and 6th is a grouping of 2 bridges that span the Cherry Creek Trail and Cherry Creek. And then Quebec over Airlawn is one standalone bridge. So 5 bridges representing those 3 projects. They're often combined.
What's the total for all 3?
So, so 6th and Lincoln, it's roughly 30, and pull the exacts.
It's 29, yeah.
Smith and Sandown is in that same range. Quebec over Airlawn is around 12. There is potential of some packaging if Quebec and Airlawn and Smith and Sandown were to go, and I can pull up on Google Maps and show you the interactions and how it works and what the consequences of Smith and Sandown are, because I know it's hard to, well, I'm gonna steal your screen.
Yeah, go for it, please.
It's probably the easiest way to do this.
Yeah, roughly 75 million for all.
Yeah.
Can use your mapping tool as well.
Not to plug that. So I-70 here is to the north. So Quebec and Airlawn is, oops, looking at the bigger screen. So Quebec over Airlawn is right here. So this is an old rail underpass that goes underneath it.
Is that the one that goes to the transit?
So this doesn't go anywhere anymore. So it's an old rail spur that used to go underneath there.
So why do we need to fix it?
That's a great question.
Well, first of all, I don't think the railroad wants to give up their right of way in this area, so they're still retaining that. So then the bridge is in really poor condition.
Yeah, so as you can see, the bridge has aged dramatically. It has already gone through repairs, significant repairs over the years to try to Band-Aid it. Those saddle structures right where my cursor are, those are not original. This is the Band-Aided version. So this needs significant repair / rework. So I'm just gonna stand up because it's easier.
So the railroad is not being, the rail line is not being used?
So yeah, the rail line used to go through here. It's not being reused, but they still have rights there.
Right.
So this structure here is aged beyond useful life. These saddles were all created to kind of reshore up the bridge. I mean, this is traffic right above here. Like those are cars passing over top.
Currently.
So that's what I was asking. It goes from where to where?
So the road itself, Quebec, is over top of this. This spur goes underneath. The railroad has rights to continue to keep that access if they ever chose to restore that in the future. Like we don't have rights to cut off their access, so we can't, it's not as simple as we can just fill that in and bring that up to grade, like what happened with the market lead on 39th. So
Yeah.
we still have to maintain it as a bridge structure.
You know, I'm not an engineer, but I recall that when I was in office, we had the railroad move railroad tracks in the Central Platte Valley.
Mhm.
We also did not move them behind Union Station, although there was conversation about it, we left them there for Amtrak. Question, why can't we negotiate with the railroad and get them to move the damn thing or get rid of it? And then could we then lower to street level?
I mean, you
Or is
go
that-
from 12 million to I mean, you're in nine figures at that point in time. You'd be dropping the entire road and also redoing the interface with I-70. You take a $12 million problem and turn it into a massive problem. Yes, Scott?
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Secretary Pena,
Like I said, I'm not an engineer.
No, you're fine.
We tried during, when the 77 project was going on to negotiate with them to do just that, right? To drop it and get rid of that track, and they were not willing to relinquish our right of way to us.
Which railroad is it?
Yeah, that's out. I would have to double check.
I think that's UP's spur.
Is that?
It's UP.
But we did do quite a bit of negotiation to try to get, to remove that, just so we could drop back others in the Central 70 project, which would have been optimal, I think, for everybody, but.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So the other two bridges are Smith and Sandown. Bridges tend to function in pairs just by nature. So you have Smith to the south and Sandown to the north. These are box girder bridges. That makes them harder to inspect. You can't see the elements in the same way that you can on the Quebec over Airlawn. I can drop down underneath them.
So this is, just for reference, I'm getting at that. This is, if you're leaving where the Quebec Square shopping area is and you're heading to I-70. So everybody who lives in Park Hill on that end gets to I-70 over Quebec. And it's weird because there's a bridge on both sides. And you have to have both of them. It's like to get, there's the underpass and then the bridge to get over Quebec to get to I-70.
So yeah, so Quebec runs under these two bridges. So Park Hill accesses Quebec off of these. Central Park potentially accesses Quebec off of these. If you're coming from East Colfax, you're driving under these bridges. And what we found out on Wednesday is that these bridges will be load rated, not could be, they will be load rated before the end of this year. And where that starts to become problematic beyond that's obviously an issue, is when these bridges load rate, I mean, you can see the industrial nature of some of these areas around it. Those trucks are not gonna not get where they're going. They're still going to get to these facilities. So the question becomes, how are they gonna get there? And the answer is, they're gonna go through the neighborhoods. Okay. So now you're gonna have industrial truck traffic driving down through Central Park, through Park Hill, cutting through neighborhoods off of East Colfax. They're still going to get where they're going. And if you don't consider this now, it will become a problem long-term.
Reiterate.
They'll be driving those trucks right down the side of where the new Park Hill Park will be.
So if all those industries benefit from this, can they contribute in some fashion?
That's a good question.
Just a question.
That's a great question. I don't know the
An
answer.
improvement district, I like it.
Should at least approach them and say, this is really for your benefit long-term. We don't want you to leave, but maybe you can throw in a few bucks.
It's a fair question.
I think that's worth exploring.
Yep. So, I mean, this one I think took all of us a little bit by surprise. Again, with them being box girder bridges, this is not as easy to like walk underneath like the way that Quebec over Airlawn is, where you can physically go down, see that there's been repairs, see that there's been a saddle. This comes up through the 2 and 5 year mandated inspections, where these have to be done through GPR processes, ground penetrating radar processes, where they see degradation of internal rebar, and that's how these get evaluated. So I think this one, we knew that there was the lifespan of a bridge is what the lifespan of a bridge is, and we knew we were heading there. I think this one took everybody by surprise, including council on Wednesday. And yeah, this one took all of us by surprise, which is why it is coming into the process late. But we are putting it for your consideration, because this is a very, very significant thing to
to consider.
I'll send out the complete PowerPoint presentation on all the bridges that we talked about earlier.
These top three are replacements, not repair.
This is not a repair at this point, no. I mean, these are significant.
The numbers you gave us are for replacement.
Those are replacements. There's a potential of phasing and doing 6th Ave over Cherry Creek and maybe deferring Lincoln a few years. There might be some advantages where we could look at what it would look like to do Quebec over Airlawn and Smith Sandown together. We can look at what it would look like to do them separately. I mean, again, we're 48 hours in right now, so we're still we haven't even done the intake form for these yet to put together a full PCW. So we're working off of rough numbers right now.
Those rough numbers are to replace.
Those rough numbers are to replace. There's not a repair for a box girder in this level of condition.
I think the benefit, this is a very good segue to the next slide. We wanted to show you about asset life for some of our key assets.
Take it back, Jackson.
Let me pull that out really quickly. And I think so I think this contains a lot of really important information. It really begs the question on, a kind of some of these Band-Aid solutions we were talking about. We saw an example of that in Quebec and Airlawn. Then you overlay with the value of doing a full replacement, essentially, renewing that asset. And so you look at, I know there was a question at our last meeting on Tuesday, really about where's some of the useful life of our assets. And so we do have a lot of examples of this. We just wanted to escalate some information that's really related to our key assets. And I mean, the punchline here is that a lot of facilities and bridge resources, a lot of things that use a lot of concrete and steel and other materials have that useful life. You can see here, it ranges from 25 to 50 years, depending on the asset. Speaking specifically to the bridges, general standard for those is about 50 years of useful life. The bridges that we have just referenced, Smith and Sandown, 6th and Lincoln over Cherry Creek, Quebec over Airlawn, and then also the 6th Ave viaduct, which is also a project under consideration. All of those are past their useful life. There is some nuance here where we have done periodic rehabs over time. We just saw an example with Quebec over Airlawn, but these are a good chunk past their useful life. So I think that's a really important component. We think through the value of reinvestment. How do we get, I think a lot of these bridges at a certain point, those Band-Aid solutions only get you so far. And I think we're really starting to get there on, I think, Patrick mentioned with 6 and Quebec over Airlawn, you really limit the amount of, we're running out of Band-Aids that we can do. Going further down to our facilities as well, I'll point out, it's a similar challenge. I think some of these pools, Aslan Pool is a great example. It was built in 1954. Those generally have a useful life of 35 to 40 years. We're pretty far past that. It's a 71-year-old facility. And so this is where we start getting into that criticality standpoint where when we get these assets past their useful life, we see these load postings that need to happen, the load ratings. And it kind of presents an active risk of closure. I think that's really the trade-offs that we're thinking about here.
And Ms. Tuso, Curtis Park Pool was in the same category. We had to close it. It couldn't be operated. So a neighborhood who is in desperate need of a pool, has been deprived until that pool gets rebuilt.
One thing I'd point out too, we did list an example, MLK Rec Center. That's over 60 years old. There are 22 rec centers that are past their useful life, have a similar standard. We just wanted to put an example out there for you all, but just thought this was a very valuable data point about our assets and just that useful life.
Positive side, with at least bridges, all of these that are listed, they're built before 1980. As technology has increased now, the lifespan of a bridge goes up to 75 years. So if we replace them, we have a longer span here before we have to worry about them again. That's a great point.
So the political challenge we are facing is if we do a lot of necessary infrastructure, and that takes up 300 million of the 800 million, or 400 million of the 800 million, you're gonna have a lot of voters who are gonna be unhappy that their local project got defunded or didn't get funded. So the question politically is one that I raised several meetings ago. Could we have on the ballot two different categories? One is a list of no tax increase projects. And then next to it, a mill levy tax increase. For example, you could list 3 or 4 viaducts. So people know exactly 3 or 4 viaducts are falling down, maybe 100 million, whatever it is, increase the mill rate by what, a quarter? To raise 100 million or less, whatever it is. But people could actively vote separately for that. Just a question, because we're gonna run into some political headwinds here. So a lot of people are gonna be unhappy. These have to get done. We can't have bridges falling, or viaducts falling, so I don't know how others feel about that. I know the mayor has reservations about not wanting to have an increase at all. But if we have a $7 billion need, what point do we just be transparent with the people in Denver?
If I was gonna do that, I wouldn't put the absolute needs in the increased taxes category. I would reverse it.
Okay.
And so people can, as folks have said, you know, everybody is willing to spend extra and maybe taxed more for the things that are not critical need.
Got it. Okay, that's another option. Just something to think about.
So for this slide, some of these like Aslan pool, it got put, it's not on our build a bond and it's not in our parking lot. So how do we can take those to reconsider, like, so those, that's the one that I told you that's highly utilized by Denver Housing Authority. And as you can see, its current age is 71 years old, older than I am. And its useful life is 35 to 40 years. So how do we, how, like the committee, this is a question for the committee. How do we take those back into consideration? Do we want to add some of those back to our parking lot so we can have a conversation about them? Or I'm looking to other committee members to figure out how to facilitate that. I'm open to suggestions and thoughts.
Don't we have, are we gonna have a pool bundle? Some of the things we're gonna talk about.
The city bides is where those currently reside, so we do have them represented, they're just not broken out as named projects. So they're in bundles currently, and if we need to pull them out individually, we can do that as well.
Or maybe just shown where they are in the bundle so we know.
Didn't we talk last time about looking at those bundles and actually identifying the top, the most critical?
You guys are jumping ahead.
He just asked the question and like.
We have them.
Yeah, I think our goal today is to go through everything. You'll,
Okay.
at the end of today's meeting, you'll see everything and have a full scope to be like, okay, here we
You
are.
guys are jumping ahead of the
Thanks,
test
Mo.
here.
A wonderful segue once again. Thank you for helping us keep
But we should put a pin in what council president. I think
Yeah,
is-
I thought it was I could have sworn I voted for it.
Wait,
I
so
told-
Nicole and I
We were-
having that
It
conversation.
was in the original one, I know, maybe.
I think we set it aside because of the bundle discussion, but it's on our radar along with all these others. So I actually really appreciate seeing all the dates on everything. That was super helpful. And so I wonder if as we go through bundles, I assume that we'll be able to go back and look at some of the dates and some of the assets. So and if folks have ones that come to mind, please share them with the team that you think we may have missed or you thought were on there. Feel free to let us know at the end today or when it comes up in the bundle.
Sure. I'd also like to address the concept of a useful building life, real quick. So when we talk about useful life of structures in particular, useful life is best kind of thrown into context around the concept of depreciation from a tax value standpoint. That's when we talk about the useful life of a building in a residential capacity is 39 to 49 years. In a commercial capacity, it's actually 29 to 39 years. That has to do with tax depreciation. We have structures, City County Building, the McNichols Building, Red Rocks that are older than that, right? And those buildings are still in fine condition, will be usable for the foreseeable future. There are buildings, like I'm from Washington, DC, that are hundreds of years old. In Europe, there are buildings that are significantly older than that. Useful life, in a functional sense, comes down to the materiality of the building and the maintenance of the building. So a building being 70 years old doesn't mean that it's on the edge of useful in the most functional sense. If it's been well maintained and it was made with, you know, triple white brick, and like, it could absolutely still have 100 years of life to it. So just want to point that out.
All right, well, excellent segue.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, Murphy?
Hey, everybody. I hear us talking about all the assets in a way that's not, that's really singular in terms of different projects and stuff, and in the way I talk about them, and in bundles. But I guess my question is don't we want to make sure that, and I get this is a question, I'm saying it as a statement, but it's really a question. Don't we want to make sure that whatever projects we choose that would help with this useful life piece and all the things that are end of life point back to the actual capital improvement planning and plan that the city already has for their prioritization? Because I know that you guys have, Jackson, on your capital side, a prioritization of projects and facilities and bridges and all those things, and to kind of pick them out from there would be kind of neat. It's not, I just feel like we got a type of program, right?
Yeah, Murphy, I can address that. You know, all the projects that we have discussed are included on the city's 6-year capital plan, and have really cascaded through this process. So I think we've really flagged going all the way back to our prioritization we did for the 6-year CIP. Those are identified and I think do complement a lot of the asset needs that we have in the city. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you, sir.
Okay, great. Excellent. So I think just speaking to the citywide programs, just before, I'm going to hand it off to Ryan here in a second, who's going to really dig into kind of how we approach this program. Just from pure logistics, I just wanted to kind of give you all a sense of kind of where we've got to and how there's been a few different versions of this. So I just want to make sure we're all tracking. So when we first kind of released the Build a Bond tool, I think that had about 20 citywide projects that really came through the citywide process. As we've worked, as you heard from executive directors, and we've continued to refine our process, we added a couple citywide programs that speak specifically to reinvestment on agency and 6-year CIP priorities. So that's things like what you heard from general services on our facilities needs, our street paving, our signals program. Those are some of the things that were added, and we also added the participatory budgeting program into that citywide bucket. Those were all reviewed with you all on Tuesday, and actually on the 30th as well when we had that conversation. So those were all in that batch as well. Since Tuesday, we've been taking a look at our programs and really thinking through. I think the direction we heard is we need something to react to, and I think we need to see a little bit more detail about what we get from those programs. So we took a look at those different programs, and we did condense a few. And so where there's assets that really do complement each other and really serve and can really be bundled more efficiently, we've kind of further condensed those. You'll see that primarily in the parks maintenance space, as well as our facilities program. The example I'll share is we combined our Electrify City Buildings program into our facility maintenance, because that really does allow for a lot of economies of scale. So if we have deficient boilers that we need to replace, there's opportunities to swap those for a heat pump. So we shouldn't just replace with outdated technology. We have the opportunity to get better cost savings and advance electrification and climate goals when we do that. So that's just some of the reasons why those programs were combined a little bit. Then we also took a look at some of our programs, particularly some of the ones that are new assets, and looked to see are there opportunities, or maybe it's a better fit for other funding sources like the CIP or dedicated revenues within that, and maybe they're not the right fit for a bond program. So what we want to review with you all today, and I'll have Ryan talk to you just in a second here, is there's 13 key citywide programs we've really listed for consideration of bond funding. And when we say that, again, it's a menu of options, and we want to kind of work through the interplay here. This number can go up, this number can go down. We really just wanted to give you all a sense of if we had X amount of dollars, here's how you could think about applying this and that, I'm just gonna go ahead, Ryan, I'll turn it over to you here.
So Ryan, before you start, so you started, can you flip back?
Yeah, you bet.
So you started with 20, now you're down to 13.
Yeah,
Correct.
The way I look at this.
I'll go through why and how they're consolidated here in a second. So just in terms of the overall approach, like, and this is just an approach, just to make you think about kind of things. So we looked through all of what's currently in consideration, put that on the map, and saw that there are lower lower amounts of projects in districts 5, 6, 10, and 11. So trying to kind of use this citywide approach to fund more projects so we have district-wide equity out of those 4 districts especially, but trying to give at least 1 to 2 projects in every single district. We mapped out all the city council feedback. We also had a long micro priority list from city council that we mapped that apply to every single one of these different citywides.
None of mine were on there.
There's 2 different types of
The micro priority,
which micro priority, the one that just came out?
Yeah, I think just to clarify, I think we've mapped to the surveying that you sent out to the city council members. I recognize there's the CIP micro priorities
no,
list
that's
that
not
was.
what I'm talking about.
Right,
I sent the mayor a list on Thursday, this past Thursday, with a letter to the mayor with micro priorities. Is that what you used?
No, what we used is, sorry, a lot of different lists going back and forth. There is other
The
documents.
Excel document that I had put together, my office put together and I shared with all of you?
Yes, that's the
Yes.
one, yes.
Also, before that, even at the start of the bond, there was a bond micro priority kind of come back with smaller items. So, but we tried to prioritize off what was in that Excel file that Jackson just referenced. So we have a lot of council input there. What came through the community that was slated to push towards this wouldn't be a standalone project. Pretty much anything under 5 million was kind of our range that fit more into these bundles. And then all the department presentations that you've heard. So doing our best to merge these 3 kind of lanes into what would conceivably be best for each bundle. And just re-emphasizing just a thought starter. So it's pretty tough. So as we go to the next slide.
We're doing it.
Spent a lot of time on it.
It's been a challenge here. So we put roughly 100 million, which is slightly less than 15% of the bond. Our initial recommendation was 20%. So still a pretty high figure. And these are 13 projects. It's just a top down. We're going to then show a screen that we go through each project piece by piece, starting with all 20 really, to then show how they're consolidated.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone had questions about the top down before we really start going bit by bit. You can start at the bottom here, Jason.
Yep.
Can you go back to that really quick?
Yes, absolutely.
We have this on our.
We can send it out after.
That's right.
We're not sure how much buy-in you'll
What if we
have
want to
with this
see
whole
here,
process.
Join the meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Turn the sound down.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. Did you have a question on the?
Just wanted to quickly look at the categories.
I'm sorry.
And to build this, we're going to start with the programs that have been rolled up or recommended for removal here in this approach. So.
What's the participatory budgeting?
Yeah, I can give a quick summary of that, and I know Kiki Turner with CPD is here as well. This is a really programmatic approach. It's been a very popular program with city council and the public. And so this really allocates a portion of dollars and has those dollars go through a standalone community engagement process where residents work directly with city staff to kind of think through different projects. They're generally small improvements, so think about it's a crossing here or a park bench there. And they will work with city staff to develop a list of projects. And it kind of goes into this mini ballot. So not like a ballot for a formal election, but it is really something that is designed kind of directly with the community where they select the projects and then they'll do a vote. So they'll create, depends 10 to 20 projects. And they'll work with to develop the ballot and then vote on that. And then the winning projects will get delivered by the city. And so It's kind of another way to continue to work with the community and really do outreach. And I want to give a shout out to Kiki. Her team does a great job with doing outreach events and engaging with folks.
Can I add color to that?
Yeah.
So, it's great synopsis, but it's only in areas where you've had a new neighborhood planning initiative. It's not citywide. So my council district right now, federal, if you think of federal, everything, all the neighborhoods west, so Berkeley, Chapel Park, Sloan's Lake, they don't have a neighborhood plan. All my neighborhoods east, so Sloan's Lake or Jefferson Park, Highland, Sunnyside, they can participate in the participatory budget. Half of my council district would, because what happens is you do a neighborhood planning initiative, it gets adopted by city council, and through that process of going through that neighborhood planning initiative, you have small projects that people have worked on, talked about in the city, in those neighborhoods. So then they go back into those neighborhoods and do it, from what I understand, because I've never had this in Council District 1. I think I'm gonna be next in Council District 1 because we had it's called the Near Northwest Neighborhood Plan come after. Is that right, Kiki?
Yes. Council President, I think just to speak to a nuance of that, you are correct. This is a program we currently fund out of the CIP. We funded about $1 million a year, and it is tied into that NPI process.
It's 2 million.
It's $2 million for this current cycle. I think this current approach would think through this more on a citywide basis. I'm gonna have Kiki come up and just talk a little bit about.
Come up here.
Yeah, sure, watch the cords.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Kiki Turner. I'm the program administrator for Denver's participatory budget, which we call the People's Budget. Pleasure working with many of you. And yes, you're correct, Councilman Sandoval, and Jackson, you're correct as well. We often take a two-prong approach when possible. We'll dedicate a portion of funds to recently completed neighborhood planning initiative areas. So we're currently going to Southeast Denver where they wrapped up plans. We'll have a special ballot of $1 million that residents from those communities will get to decide how to spend. But we recognize this process is best when we can also have a broader citywide approach. So going forward this year, there will be a citywide ballot as well that is also $1 million that anyone in the city and county of Denver can participate in. So I think to Jackson's point, if we saw an infusion of funds into this program through the general obligation bonds, those monies would most likely go towards expanding our citywide approach. So people can put their ideas towards potentially bigger or more neighborhood infrastructure projects.
It's been quite popular.
Yeah.
Quite popular.
So it's 2 million a year, and you're adding 3 million to it over the next 6 years?
We have fluctuated a little bit depending on city budgets. It's been $1 million to $2 million. So a $2 million investment would certainly be a good addition to our program.
So that's what we have flagged, 3 million. We can kind of talk to it once we get into this model, what that would do. And so maybe we'll go back.
Yes.
Some examples of past years and how far, like what, of projects that have been funded through participatory budgeting might be helpful.
Yeah, I can speak to one we're actually cutting the ribbon on next week. We worked in East Colfax with residents. One of the key concerns there is we see urban heat island effects. So in some of our more vulnerable, historically underinvested neighborhoods, there is a lack of trees. So there's a specific park that predominantly serves a couple subsidized public housing properties. It's called New Freedom Park. Very, very popular, one of their most utilized parks. Yes, happy, I'm sure you'll appreciate it. So residents got really creative and came up with a broad menu of items that would add heat relief to the park. They worked very, very closely with Denver Parks and Rec staff to add this beautiful new shade pavilion structure. And for the first time, they pursued these little miniature tables with shade associated with them. So it was a $300,000 project. And what's very exciting about our process is we try to focus on communities who might not be allowed to participate in traditional city government. So we work very much with our immigrant refugee communities, young people, Girls Inc. we connect with quite a bit to give those individuals a chance to have their perspectives heard. So we're inviting all those folks out on World Refugee Day next week to open up the new shade pavilion.
So was that on a neighborhood plan?
Yes, so the East Colfax was part of our very first process where we had $1 million to plans and $1 million citywide. That was part of the plan related process. And in the plan, they identified East Colfax as a urban heat island.
Thank you. Second question. So if this were approved generally, hypothetically, on the ballot, would it say
That's a great question. I think that might be more of a finance question.
Okay, so you haven't decided
I think we would, Jackson, I'll let you.
yet. That's fine.
To have-
We'll talk about it later.
It would likely be in the companion ordinance, not, it's like as far as directly named on the ballot, it would be in the companion ordinance.
Okay, and third question, someone said a couple of meetings ago that you're currently going through the capital improvement budget process now. How are we connecting to that? Or are we?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. We generally kick off the annual budget each year in April. And so we actually just received a lot of our budget requests back for the 26 cycle. That deadline was June 6th, so we're kind of pouring through that as well. I think it's actually a really great opportunity because we all are doing the work of preparing a bond list. And then we all know as these change requests, that's what we call it, request for additional resources is a change request. We have the opportunity, and this is a really unique part of this year, preparing for 26, is as this group finalizes a bond list, we'll have a really good indication of how to use the CIP in a way that complements the investments of the bonds. That's certainly our intent. We recognize this still needs to be referred to the ballot. Voters would need to approve it, but I think I will say generally, I think the role of the committee here in the CIP is really helping refine that list and then working with agencies and city council and mayor's office to really make sure that those investments are comprehensive and we can leverage the two programs together in a way that best complements the 6-year CIP.
That's my point.
Yeah.
They ought to be. So if something doesn't make this, like, CIP. Third question, is the CIP just, I know it's typically an annual process, but do you have a sense of what the CIP budget might look like 2 years from now?
Yeah, I always say as a joke, whatever year it is, the 1, 2 years out. So I always joke, it's never too early to start talking about 27 or 28 budget, and we've had some of those conversations.
Great.
So
That's great.
Yeah.
So
And every agency does a 6-year plan. So
got it.
many of these projects that are on the bond
Yep.
are projects that have been on the CIP 6-year plan.
Okay.
And if they don't get funded or don't get funded completely,
Yep.
the agency has an opportunity to marry some CIP dollars to help either complete it or push it forward.
Great, because it might be helpful if we say, we can't do this one this year, but 2 years from now, it's gonna be in the city CIP budget. So just having that coordination, I think, would be helpful, so that we can explain to the public why it is their project didn't make it. Just hang on for another year.
Yeah.
No, seriously.
Yeah.
Then people have hope.
I will say it does feel like a lot of the stars are aligning with just different update cycles where we had a 6-year CIP that was, we finalized early this year.
Right.
Now we're going into a bond process. Now we're going into the CIP process. It's a 6-year bond cycle that follows right after a 6-year CIP. And so it feels like it's really good cadence and we're able to make those types of decisions and projections.
Okay, great.
As it relates to participatory budget, I know that you said that historically it's followed the neighborhood plans. Do you have a sense of the ability to scale this if we were to, we being you all, were to decide to do 3 million, but wanted to break it out to a set amount per council district? Do you have a way to roll that out if they wanted to do that?
I think we do. What I will say is, it is hard to construct infrastructure projects that don't have a certain small budget. So the very first year that I ran this program with Jackson, we had some maximum budgets of $300,000. And it is hard to get projects done for that amount. I think we have our, I'll say, internal infrastructure. We could run a process that would have this program have a dedicated amount of dollars to each council district. But I would say I think the amount per council district would have to be of a certain amount to make that kind of a meaningful process and something that would kind of satisfy both the residents and the council people in that district. With something like this, I think we would see probably the 3 million just infuse into that citywide process. So the dollars could go to any council district depending on what we hear from residents and what makes it onto the ballots. That's how I see it rolling out with the $3 million budget amount.
Infusion. Okay.
And that's part of the interplay here and why it's a menu of options. I think we certainly can look at doing like a per council district thing. That number probably needs to go up from 3. Then you do a citywide process with 3. And then just depending on how we just want to design, and there's that interplay kind of stitched into any of these programs.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're gonna say to a council person, you're not gonna get your 500,000, but you're gonna get a 10 million on the bond.
Yeah.
So you gotta be happy.
But at the same time, I'm gonna play the devil's advocate. You could, in a council district, let's just say, council district 8, say we wanna do the fire training academy. That doesn't feel like something for the residents. I mean, it is, right? It's a training facility for our firefighters and for our sheriffs and our police. But that will look like a huge disproportionate amount going into one council district if there's not other projects on there.
Yeah.
So I'll just say that some of these ones, like a bridge, like if I was just looking through the build-a-bond, the updated one, there's lots of bridges in council districts, so it looks like they're getting like a huge infusion of, but they're not actually getting anything like a rec center where it would make somebody excited or a pool, right? So I think we have to be cautious about using council districts for that and thinking about okay, so if one of our values is public safety and making sure that we can recruit firefighters and police officers and sheriffs, which right now, I think we're 40% down in sheriffs. We can't recruit sheriffs to Denver. We need a facility to draw those people, but it will be located in Council District 8, but Council District 8 still. So I think that we have to take away those council districts when we're thinking about some of those things,
Yeah.
even though it's really easy to filter that way.
That's a really good point on the mapping, is that a lot of the projects that we're talking about, especially some of the really big ones, are really citywide projects.
They
They are
are.
not neighborhood serving projects.
For this approach, we struggle with that too. And so I think I know you guys are probably sick of new updated build-a-bonds, but we created a regional category here to label the 6th and 8ths and all of these more needed projects, but not so flash for the specific district. So you'll see that, and that was the attempt here, is just to make sure every district has at least a few, neighborhood projects might be the way to describe that. But back to participatory budgeting, right? If we did the 3 million, that's roughly 250 per district, and that's not quite enough. So just to keep that in mind, if we were to increase that, we need to increase it to
Our
something.
baseline, when we go to different neighborhood planning initiative areas, they don't align exactly with council districts, but we sort of recognize that our floor is about $1 million. We need $1 million to go into the neighborhood.
Yeah,
planning
I
area.
wouldn't recommend trying to specify it per district,
Yeah, with the 3 million, I
Needs to
don't.
be flexibility.
I may be asking a question that's been answered, I apologize. Let's take the outdoor pool upgrade bundle, 5.5 million. Where can we see the list of the 5.5? You'll have.
Next.
Yeah, the next segue. I would love to flow in this meeting if that was fantastic. They'll send you guys checks later
Look at that.
Thank you.
moving us along.
Thank you, Kiki.
Yes.
With the segue.
It's going good. Okay, so now more of an Excel dive here. So apologies for that, but just want to start with the projects that we've flagged for removal and merging into other areas. So it's really these smaller projects that really go with a parks bundle. If we start with parks lighting, we're going to talk about that in the parks general maintenance budget that we recommend 60 million for up higher on this list. With public EV charging, that's a much smaller figure per unit that really can be done with other capital sources. So we recommend that to
Correct, this is what we've condensed.
start with the removals and go to the bigger dollar figures, the
Okay,
higher
well,
priorities.
Oh, these are removed.
In this approach, certainly not removed from
Got
anything
it.
officially, yeah. Parking lots and drives, another parks bundle addition, putting it into parks general maintenance. Same with dog parks, the new and upgrades. All those kind of lower dollar figures that can be grouped in a bigger capacity part of this approach. Same with the water conservation, which is really irrigation projects, also part of the parks general maintenance, and athletic fields.
All kind of things that speak to the assets within parks.
So this is your cut and suggesting that we think about.
Yeah, it's a very baseline approach to, certainly as you all dive in, you can change any of this.
And this isn't pulling these investments off. You'll see them in we just made a Parks General Maintenance citywide program that will include some of these things.
No, I'm really confused.
Once we get to the Parks General Maintenance, just thinking about how an ordinance would go through too, these all make sense to be part of which was singular bundle to us.
So these specified athletic fields, water, irrigation, dog park. Now what they've done is consolidate that into a Parks General and put a range so that you could do some irrigation and some out of just one bundle.
And this gets down to really kind of like the contracting level. Like if we're gonna do a new athletic field, it probably will need some irrigation. And so we wouldn't want to cordon those off as separate programs. Again, it's like the energy efficiency and boiler replacement. Like it makes a little more sense to just put them together.
Okay, all right.
Okay, next here, Transit Supportive Improvements Program. With this thought, right, we're funding a $280 million BRT program right now, and there was relatively lower priority, both from the subcommittee, from the Dottie presentation, and from council feedback towards the transit supportive improvements. So this one would be a remove and fund in other types of capital.
This is BRT?
Yeah, so transit supportive improvements is not necessarily BRT projects. I think it is funding things like signal prioritization for buses or other dedicated lanes for buses. And while we recognize that's a benefit, it advances the goals of Denver Moves Everyone. We are making major progress in that space in the Colfax BRT program. And so we felt that this specific program probably can look for CIP or other funding sources down the line. Probably not the best fit for this bond program.
And low means it was not recommended high on any of the subcommittee lists, right?
Yeah, it's tier 2 for subcommittee, so it's not saying it's the lowest. Like they certainly recommended it to be funded, but with our funding constraints, this was lower than other projects.
I apologize to the committee for all my questions, but.
No, this is great. This is all
very good. Slow one here, but can we put what's the expression? The elephant in the room? BRT. And Council President, you raised this about BRT, you don't want it on 38th. Has the administration made a decision to hold off on all further BRT projects until the East Colfax project is finished? So see whether it's successful or not. Can someone answer that question?
I wouldn't say hold off, but I do think that there is strong interest in seeing what the impacts are of the construction along Colfax, and then when the service actually starts.
Okay, that's very helpful. My own personal opinion is, it's my own personal opinion, I want to see if it works.
So do we.
Okay.
I would also be helpful to understand which ones, so Colfax, it was a major capital stack, right? So I know that federal, we were talking about it, but I don't think that those dollars from the federal level, sorry, federal Boulevard. So Federal Boulevard, but I don't think that the allocation of dollars has been allocated down from the federal government for the BRT along Federal Boulevard. I know I'm using a lot of federal. I don't know if it's just the name of the street. So it's helpful because the Colfax BRT was major capital stack. I mean, it was bond, it was CIP, and it was federal dollars and state dollars, right? So for these, I think this is smart because unless you all know something I don't, and CFO knows something I don't know any other corridors that actually have allocated dollars from the federal government or CDOT to these. They have allocated dollars to study them, but I don't think like to build it out. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're correct. I know that there was discussion of federal, there's discussion of
Federal Boulevard.
Federal Boulevard, there's discussion of Colorado. But they both need, further study and capital stacks, and you also still need an RTD component.
I'm sorry, Patrick, but I have to interrupt. So you're gonna put money into studying them?
Not us, that is CDOT, that is RTD, that is not the city doing that, so.
We're actively involved in those studies, Kenya, working with CDOT on that, but they are leading those corridors, unlike Colfax, where Denver actually led Colfax.
So we're not putting city money into studying any more BRTs. It's state money that is studying other BRTs.
Yeah, the federal and the Colorado, and I'll see if we're doing any studies internal to Denver for our own corridors, but I can check on that for you.
So yeah, thought process is wait before we fund other types of bus-related transit supportive improvements with this approach. Kind of similar with the neighborhood streets with bikeways, which it was a very high priority for the subcommittee with connectivity. And we heard presentations from Dottie, and there's lots of options for how we would implement this. But I think throughout this committee, we've heard there are grander bike plans for the whole city coming. And so it's kind of a wait and see, should we be putting money into these neighborhood bikeway plans before a greater implementation might happen? So maybe hold before that.
And do we know when the audit's gonna be completed?
Hey,
Go ahead.
this is Taylor Phillips, planner at Dottie. As far as the bikeway plan goes, we have a final bike plan. We're actually going to likely release it on Bike to Work Day in a couple of weeks. So I wouldn't say that we don't have a citywide plan. That's inaccurate. And then secondly, to your question about the evaluation study, we're hoping to release kind of some FAQ sheets that's really similar to that presentation that was, I think, included in your all's packet. And then the final report will be finished later this summer. Unfortunately, we can't really fast track it. It's about a 200-page, huge document that requires a lot of work to get done.
So the thought with this approach is wait for all of these studies and recommendations to come out before using CIP funding to put these bikeways in place. Related to the bike, scooter, and corral build out, another one that's pretty small dollar figure per unit that can be funded with alternate funding sources. CIP dollars could do this, other areas certainly could.
And I would add, once you get into the nuance of program delivery and financial reporting, we generally try, it is best for bond programs to manage kind of larger dollar amounts, and at 3,000 per corral, that really fits better into a CIP bucket. There's opportunities for private funding here. So we felt like, again, maybe not the best fit, good program, not the best fit for a bond program.
I also want to flag, while technically citywide, it only impacts District 9 and 10. It at full build out, while we have a per corral number for you at full build out, this is $300,000. Just so we're all clear of what the max scope of that would be.
And then do we put them, just so I'm understanding, we build them and we put them in the right of way, like the one that was built on Platt Street right in front of my office. That was Dottie who built it, right?
Yes.
It's not Lime or Lyft.
No.
Although they are contributing, I think, to some of the bike corrals downtown, they're required to start building them.
Yeah,
Yes.
with the new legislation that passed. Correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Thank you.
This came out of a public idea.
Electrify city buildings, as we've mentioned before, we've merged that into the facilities reinvestment, since those should be done complementary, and so get into that once a little bit later. So now we'll really start with these bundle funding, and I'll just preface that almost all of these approaches are far less than what the departments would request, or and it's just going to be very, very difficult to fund anything. So we did our best approach to keep it fair, council district equity, and merge with what certain council and department priorities should be. So starting with this, if we were to do this trail upgrades, I've flagged that D10 has pretty small investment, and they will get a lot from the DDDA, but this Cherry Creek Trail was one of both Park's highest priorities from the trail upgrades bundle, and would help D10 quite a bit. So this would be just funding one project here. You all could definitely change and put in multiple trail upgrades. Parks on their presentation had 9 different trails flagged. This was their 9th highest priority from everything on their presentation. We've seen 4 different council requests and 5 other parks related, so there's a lot of options.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think the example here would be D10 investments along the Cherry Creek Trail, doing, making some improvements to that area, right?
Colfax to First Avenue.
Can I ask a question that we had, not on the top list, but some consideration for potentially 2 other, I don't know whether they're considered trail projects or not. So the 303 Artway and the Montbello Freshlow, would those, if they were fitting into a citywide bundle, would those be here?
So it's a great,
or
it's a great
someplace
question.
else?
I think we started to talk on Tuesday a little bit about how we're defining and like what is a citywide and what is a standalone. And so really again with these citywides, I think we are really focusing these are your smaller assets, very scalable, programs that we kind of package together and kind of deliver in one package. I think with like the Montbello Freshlow, I think that is a much higher dollar amount. I don't have the number right in front of me at the moment, but
I'm not talking about the whole thing. What we were talking about with all of those, with those, those projects were not an all or nothing. They're imminent, they're just as scalable as Cherry Creek. So you could do portions or sections like as in a demonstration project, portions of either of those 2 as a part of this trail bundle. They're easily as scalable as the Cherry Creek Trail goes from one end of town to the other. So it's just, it's not any different ultimately than those.
So last time you all talked about this, you had indicated to consider it. I think the next step on that is at what scale, to your point. That is still a decision to be made.
And this could be a great tool if we go really low on the scale, just add, 10, 15 to this trail upgrades bundle. And with that recommendation, that's an option. But if it gets bigger than that dollar figure, we probably would want it as a standalone named project for Montbello.
Yeah. And so the question really is could, and I believe they could, because they're just like Cherry Creek, you could take segments of those and, and choose to make a really important statement of this is what it would look like, It's the same thing we've been talking about on the 5280 trail. You can't do the whole doggone thing is, hundreds of millions of dollars, but you could make a start in key places and move the needle a little.
I think coining the term on the demonstration project, I think that's some of the optionality present in
So just for the record, I would certainly encourage some consideration of, those are really important to the neighborhoods, the communities in those areas, and so.
Yeah, it could be helpful as we kind of go through each bundle for you all individually to flag how important that is to you. You see the $3 million figure, is that really high? Would I like to get that a lot lower, higher? And then I would be thinking about what are we removing to make that happen, right? Because if all of these are a fund or not, so the money has to come from somewhere else. The next bundle here is the playgrounds, which District 5 had Denison Park as a priority D2. This just seemed to fit pretty well with how to get D2 some citywides here with the Pinehurst playground replacement.
Pinehurst or Hirshhorn?
We could do Hirshhorn as well. I had Pinehurst flagged as one of their. I think Hirshhorn is a standalone, which we tried to keep those as those are considerations for the committee. These are just an approach recommendation, so not trying to take anything from the standalones and put them in here until we talked about.
Yes.
And it's about $1 million per neighborhood playground. So this one works really well, I think, to give different neighborhoods different items as maybe a last only a little bit of money available. This you could really inflate this one easily. We already talked about participatory budgeting. I don't know if anyone else has any more questions or comments related to that, but $3 million could do a few big projects as Kiki discussed. But subtet, the request from public safety here, and it was their second highest priority on their presentation, was $2 million, which included 6 different lighting safety projects. And so if we cut that in half, which is about the theme for all department requests throughout this approach, this would fund 4 of the programs in 3 different districts. This would give D8, D3, District 9, and then D3 would get another. And this Lincoln, La Alma Park, and the Morrison and Perry areas of D3 have seen a lot of requests for this area. So this would be the approach to fund the top 4 on the subted list.
Are these all based on the
Place network investigation.
Thank you.
Yes.
So what happened is the place network investigation is that all of the city agencies coming together, led by the police department and nonprofits, to try to figure out how to tackle crime where it's happening. And so the police department goes out and does this subted and gives the report out. So this is based on a subted report from the police department, correct? Where the place, what do you say?
Place network investigation.
Place network investigations. I always NPI in that one. I flip. So this one's really important for my colleagues as we're figuring out crime, and it's really worked in several council districts. So just want to advocate for that. That this one is based on report. Yeah.
And it's where we've used the data to help inform what's the most critical.
Correct.
That's correct.
So why wouldn't we bump that up to 2 million then?
Easy to do, certainly, but
Backed by data and.
It is backed by reports, and it's multi-agency. I don't know all the agencies that.
Parks, Public Works, and so because Parks and Public Works also help implement a lot of its lighting in parks or landscaping, or how do we adjust alleyways? So it's a lot of that crime data and impacting and affecting that.
They said they need 2 million?
that's their request, yeah.
And if I can chime in, I do believe if this, I think this tends to have some easy wins in it, because you can do almost like micro grant kind of things for crime through environmental design. And so I do support doing something here, because it can have a major impact across the city, I think, in terms of just doing some micro kind of grant type stuff.
We'll certainly flag that we could fund higher. I think the next step here, after we're done with this whole review, is then to really focus on what projects are actually yeses and actually look at that funding number. So before we say we're going to give this 2 million, I think we have to look at the full pot, right, and how we can fund anything.
Yep. Just a really quick add-on to get a little bit more granular with the P&I point that Council President was making. Not only have we used this data in really impressive ways over the past year to bring down gun violence and areas where it was really concentrated in really high ways. But as you could imagine, each of the areas that we identify as needing that focus needs very different types of response. So sometimes it's lights, sometimes it's design, sometimes it's using a park in a radically different way. And so having funding to do that is very, very important. We've seen really good early success in using the P&I approach in really targeted ways. And so I would just echo Council President saying that this is a very good investment for the city.
You can absolutely make that adjustment and see. Yep.
All right, I can put it in right here. Oh, I thought we could have do that. Right, now we're talking.
Hey, somebody's getting fired.
Come on,
This next, traffic calming, it gets a little tricky, kind of similar vein of that there aren't so many studies out yet with a full traffic calming plan. This was a repeated high priority for District 5. They've already considered 3 different standalones for District 5 related to traffic calming, and those are all removed from consideration currently. So this would be a pretty easy way to, here is 2.5 million, the flexible number, to just District 5 traffic calming studies, and District 5 was a lower funded district as well. There was a request from
Could you give us examples of the traffic calming projects?
Yeah, I can jump in here. Taylor Phillips again, senior planner. The traffic calming type projects would primarily probably include things like the speed bumps that we've started to put out on the streets recently, the newly accepted, I guess, engineering thing that we can do. So it's primarily neighborhood traffic calming on your local streets or your residential collector streets where we see really high speeds over the posted speed limit.
So these are speed bumps. Does this include those little
circles?
The little, on the corners where you put the
curb extensions. The curb extensions, yeah, could include curb extensions too. Lots of tools in the toolbox. We could do things like flipping stop signs so that people have to stop a little bit more frequently and discourages that like really high speeding between traffic lights.
And so is this primarily a sort of neighborhood requests for slowing down speeds? And do we have any data that helps give us some performance on these measures?
Yeah, so this is setting up a brand new program. So we're starting like this week on identifying where those streets with the worst speeding are. And we'll go through and prioritize those based on kind of equity, safety, all of our usual goals and factors that we use for prioritizing projects, and looking to you all as well. This was one of the most requested, I think, from the transportation side projects through the Vibrant Denver process. So this is really just setting up that program to be responsive to those concerns.
With the price tag of $1 million to $2 million per mile, it's a little tricky. Certainly have the agency to just allocate, but from this approach, it's, hey, we pick a district or several districts. In this instance, it's District 5 to put 2.5 million towards District 5 traffic calming. It's just a high dollar figure, but we could increase that and incorporate more districts here. And I think, Dottie, correct me, that it could be done and they could take those fundings and then use their studies to then implement the traffic calming according to where this committee recommends.
So the study I was asking about was less about what are the ones where the requests are and more along the lines, do these things actually work?
Oh yeah, correct. Yeah, good question. We the study that I was mentioning earlier about the bikeways evaluated specifically these speed cushions as a pilot, and we found that they generally get speeds much lower than originally than they were before, often down to below 20 miles an hour on our local streets, which is our posted speed limit on residential streets.
So, any final questions on this? Traffic calming? The next.
You said it's just District 5?
In this approach, we've heard a lot of feedback from District 5 around speeds in that neighborhood or that district. So this would be one way to increase funding for District 5 that's a lower funded with all the rest of the projects. Certainly available to expand, but it'd have to come at a reduction in some other area.
And I think that approach just kind of shows how one can use citywide strategically. If we have, I think like Brian said, if we have areas that have just in our in consideration list to have fewer, citywide is a way to kind of balance that district scale.
And there's certain citywide programs that I think are more appealing to certain districts than others, just by the nature of each district. The needs of each district are very different, and the priorities of the district are different. So I'll put Council President on the spot here. There are certain ones that if we asked Council President to rank the citywide programs for which ones would make the most impact in her district, that would look different than Councilman Flynn. That would look different than Councilwoman Gilmore. That would look different than Councilwoman Sawyer, as those are in different parts of the city and the nature of investments and just demographics across the city. They would feel very different.
But we would develop lists in all districts as we see the criteria come in. So if it did expand it to 7 or
in this particular one that, we're on the pedestrian crossing, right?
Still talking about traffic calming, but next on the list is pedestrian crossings.
We're ready.
So we
Really
can-
happy.
We can move right into that.
Yeah.
Which, I think it complements traffic calming because another item that was heavily targeted by the citywide feedback by the residents, a lot of council feedback as well. We could give recommendations to council if we gave any type of dollar figure, about 250,000 or 120,000 for a level A crossing. I mean, I think in general, the highest would be 250,000 per crossing. Taylor can correct me. So if we gave dollar figures to council members and to transportation saying, hey, in this instance, right, $2 million spread around all the districts that have seen less of the council priorities that are the in consideration projects, they then decide which are the most critical areas. It's a pretty easy way to give some smaller funding to the other districts.
Just a point, that this is one that gets really closely coordinated with Denver Public Schools and school crossings. Very,
Which I think is very important for Councilmember Cashman in District 6, which has very low funding so far, to coordinate with the schools. So that's, District 6 has 2 of those right next to schools in this approach, so.
traffic areas, yeah.
Do you use the, speaking, going off of what Happy just said, Safe Routes to School program? Would that help fund the Safe Routes to School program, or is it different? Or could it be help fund the Safe Routes to School program? For those who don't know, we have, like, Dottie has a program to try to get kids to school safely, Safe Routes to School. And my colleagues and I have been trying to get it more funding over the years. Could it be part of it, or is it totally separate?
Could be.
It could be executionalized. I mean, to me, it's just another funding, it's another type of funding that we could use, but I mean, we'd wanna talk to Dottie, I think, about how the program works and it's staffed and where it best lives, but I think the spirit of it is certainly
Coordinating.
similar.
Taylor came off mute. I didn't know if you had a comment on that.
Oh, I was just gonna say that the pedestrian crossing program works extremely closely with the Safe Routes to School program. So while the Safe Routes to School program does have its own funding source that's separate from ped crossings, there's a lot of overlap of projects where we'll kind of cross-pollinate, if you will, and prioritize the ped crossing program projects in the Safe Routes to School areas.
Okay.
Okay, next on the list is the affordable housing and sheltering ADA installations. This was the second most on the host priority presentation. And so there are 33 different project installations targeted across locations around, it's spanning over 7 different council districts, 19 different shelter providers incorporated in this, 11.3 million. And just purely targeting ADA accessibility for housing and sheltering. So here we put in their full request for 11.3. It is scalable, but they don't really have a clear priority list because it seems high need and we need to be in compliance with all these ADA facilities.
These city-owned properties?
It's a mix of, the city does facilities out or helps the ADA inside the non-owned property. So I think we have jurisdiction to do everything.
Yeah.
So a few of them are, most of them are not, but most of them also are city funded. At least partially.
I think the funding is the key there. With that city funding comes ADA compliance needs. And so I think that's what drives this specific ask.
I would take it one step further. It's not needs, it's requirement. And that's the, it's a.
So we have third-party providers that provide a lot of the shelter space that the city can't supply, and we help fund them. But when we put money into somebody to do something, then they have to do it the right way, which is comply with ADA requirements.
Yes, and when we do so, it makes us a party to that compliance.
Right.
Seeing any further question on this? The next is this big bundle that we've already seen some questions on, parks general maintenance. So this approach puts 16 million for all of these parks sub-projects, with a recommendation for what that would specifically contain. So this would be 7.7 million for the Cook Park irrigation, another council equity. It's the second highest of all the parks recommended irrigation projects, second to City Park, which is its own standalone. In terms of need, I think there's a lot of waste going with the leaks from that irrigation system. And it was their 6th overall bond priorities, City Park or irrigation total. Next on the sub bundle would be a field upgrade for Ruby Hill Park in District 7. And so that is the second highest on the park's list of field upgrades in need of a replacement, and would help District 7 get something on the list of citywides. 2 lighting upgrades would be part of this for $1 million each, with Barnum Park, which was the second highest rated lighting need from parks, and a council recommendation from District 3. And then Cheeseman Park lighting, give a little bit more to District 10, and it was on Parks request list, a little lower out of there, but in their top 10 of lighting needs. This would contain $600,000 for a Kennedy Dog Park rehabilitation in District 2, which was Parks #1 dog park priority, and came up through the public in several different instances too for Kennedy Park. And then it has 2.2 million in this approach that would then give some discretionary abilities to parks to fund their parking lot bundle, any of these other dog parks, or lighting these smaller figures.
Especially as we go in, you know, again, these are examples, but if you go into an area and you have the opportunity to, as you do in the irrigation, if you could repave the parking lot, like you get a lot of better efficiencies, and I think that kind of what makes up that 2.2.
A one build strategy.
You got
We're gonna
it.
tear it up
Yep.
and do this and fix this and fix that at the same time.
We would think probably with the
Economies
Cook
of
Park,
scale.
irrigation, Jack mentioned that earlier, probably try and do a field, and so maybe some of that discretionary would go into a full, rehabilitation.
I know you are working on so many things. Thank you for that. But a meeting or so ago, I asked whether we could get Excel to participate in some of the park lighting, for example, in Marsh Park. And so, has anybody had a chance to talk to Excel yet? Or?
I did. So I'm in all these crazy meetings. We're working on their franchise agreement right now, and that has to go to the vote.
Right.
And so when I had my briefing with them on Monday, I brought that up.
Okay.
I don't think it's in there. I don't think they're gonna think of anything different. Our franchise agreement is usually within the right of way. And so they made it very clear, the franchises agreement in the right of way. I've been fighting over lights in like dog parks in my council district because it's really dark and it's safety issues. I think it will probably continue to be a fight with Excel. I could be wrong. Anyone else want to say something different? I'd be happy to say that it could be different, but I continue to bring it up. I know my colleagues continue to bring it up. I know that they're a partner in the place net.
Place network investigation.
Network investigation. I do know that they are, sorry, P&I, I can't remember that one. I do know that they are a partner in that one, and that they have come to the table in those instances where there's a lot of gun violence and there's a lot of violence. Everywhere else, they're a great partner, but sometimes complicated. Same with the rail. They're a great partner and sometimes complicated, and I will continue to bring that up.
Great, thank you. All right, next on the list here, and we're merging into what we put as very high priorities for these final 5 that high department priorities, high council priorities, and really impact the needs of the city. So with our traffic signals program, the city has 1,400 traffic signals in operation. Currently, 600 of them are rated as poor or critical. With the current funding per year, on a good year, 2025, they're hoping to get about 35 different signals replaced. It goes anywhere from 20 to 40 signals. So if you do that mapping, we have a need of 600 and 25 to 40 per year. This bond funding would do a lot to help. Past bonds, Elevate gave a lot more to this, but with this recommendation, hard to fit in 100 million, but we put 10.8 million as a request.
And these are also for the new traffic signals. So generally, our mills go towards replacing ones that are out of date or in bad shape. So we don't generally have enough money to ever put the new ones in that or have met warrants or. So this is, most of it would go towards new traffic signals, but some of it would go towards replacement.
This is one of our programs. It's both reinvestment and new assets.
Yeah. So, yeah, it could go to 12 new or replacement signals in this instance, and it also dedicates some funding to their 19 shovel-ready fiber network projects, which they're reinstalling this, or not reinstalling, but upgrading to a new fiber system this upcoming year, and really need to put in these new fiber networks. Pretty high priority for Dottie. And yeah, it would work with council members to kind of merge with these 12 signals, which are high council priorities mixed with the Dottie list of needs, and do a small dent to what is needed for signals. Regarding rec centers here, another extreme is the second highest priority for parks in their presentation. Trying to focus here heavily on that council equity. This 12.3 million would just do 3 different rec centers based off of a mix of council equity and the park priorities. And that aging infrastructure, St. Charles was one of the oldest rec centers out there in District 9. And so this would give St. Charles, MLK, another very old rec center, and then Montbello, which has low funding and has a lot of problems with that rec center. So not one of the oldest, but it has a lot of issues. And so kind of trying to merge the age problem mixed with council or district equity with this approach, so 12.3.
So with that slide that you showed us, like how Aslan Pool, that wouldn't be enough to cover Aslan and other things, right? Because I can't remember how much Aslan Rec Center pool.
That's the pool,
which is
Yeah, but this says interiors and indoor pools, right? Because Berkeley has an indoor pool, so like I'm just trying to, and Berkeley was its own standalone project. So maybe I shouldn't have said Aslan because as an indoor. And like Scheitler Rec Center was also on there. I'm just trying to figure out how much that would get each council district. If you actually go to the most highest used and our oldest, I don't understand. You know what I mean? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. This 12.3 is just for those 3 rec centers.
Say them one more time.
So 12.3 million would
Got it.
only fund these specific 3 rec centers.
Say the rec centers one
So
more
that
time.
would be Montbello, St. Charles, and MLK.
Got it.
As an example.
Yeah, purely as an example, but different aspects too, like MLK needs an indoor pool replacement and interior facility upgrades, while St. Charles is only needed interior improvements, so kind of lower funding. So it's not just 12.3 divided by 3, it's a mix.
Just so you know, we can't see that next, we have a list.
Yeah, I'm trying to ride the fine line of showing you information without making it too small, but yes.
There you go. Thank you. Just so you know, we can't.
If you select that outcomes box too, Jackson, for once we're talking through, then they can at least kind of read that in small font.
We got it.
Yeah, so here it's tough because there's 22 rec centers with needs, so have to pick some of them.
And we do have a prioritized list as well from the Parks Department as well. So we can refresh that data for you too.
Now we go into outdoor pools. So that's Atslin and Garfield and Cook are the 3 targeted by parks as being the worst right now. And so it's 17 million for Atslin and Garfield to fully replace the pools. Cook Park doesn't need a full replacement, but does need a pool upgrade. So that's what we have here. It's just the 5.5 million. Just wanted to flag that we could add up to 34 on top of the 5.5 if we wanted to address the 3 most critical pools.
And I think this does introduce a bit of a challenge as we started talking about pools earlier. I think we've been trying to stay true to the definition of what a citywide is, and I think we got a good definition of that on Tuesday. But then this is a challenge for the full replacements. That 17 million, it's hard to say that's a citywide program. It can be easily bundled. It really is. It really does fall within that standalone category, and so that's the nuance here of like why Aslan and Garfield maybe fall within this standalone category, whereas you see the 5.5 for the pool rehab of Cook, it's a different type of project.
What are you doing with Aslan on this one?
Just try to mention it, so we bring it up because we're talking about outdoor pools, so it should be kept as a standalone, but it kind of.
So they listed the top 3 pools in need here, but the funding here is just for an upgrade to Cook.
Yeah, the example here says to, in the context of citywides, one, it would make sense to do pool rehabs out of this bundle. They're still pretty, they're on the on the paradigm of what's a low cost program and a high cost program. This is certainly a high cost program. I think it's just saying the rehabs here, for this example, you could look at 1, you could look at 2, you could look at 3. It's just a matter of increasing that funding.
But the 5.5 million for Cook Park would keep it off we gotta replace the whole doggone thing for another several years at least.
Exactly, yeah.
Same as Aslan, right?
I think Aslan passed that point, so we couldn't, put 5.5 in Aslan. It was.
Aslan is the Quebec over Airlawn of pools.
There's a point, this is still good money after some maybe extending the life versus throwing good money after a project that's dead.
So would it be helpful for the committee if you had maybe not another column? You've got 5.5 and or 15.7.
Or 34 million.
Because at the end of the day, when we go through everything, how do we know, let's go back with another 10 million, we could do more work.
I think that's
the per unit cost.
Backfill.
The full pool replacement, probably the lowest dollar figure you're gonna get is around 15 million. That's really a real replacement. That's really a standalone project and not, like in these others, we're getting 12 of these and 3 or 4 of these. In this one, for Aslan and Garfield, that's another 30-some million dollars.
And that's, as Emily mentioned, that's the value of the per unit cost here. And so you can do that math a little bit on, our pool upgrades are 5.5 for 1, 11 for 2.
All I'm saying is for us to think about this at the end of the day, it would be nice to say, here's an additional column. If you had the flexibility to do 20, 30 million more, here it is, just to remind us.
Sure.
So we don't forget.
Yeah, we can kind of have a couple scenarios of, absolutely.
That's all I'm asking.
Yep, totally.
It might be helpful, so some of Garfield, Aslan, Schrecker are named projects.
Right.
So it might be helpful to flag here, those are outside of the bundles, those are also named projects.
Yeah, we could look at related
To
named
kind of think
projects.
about these things holistically, bundle and there are named projects.
There's a number of those throughout all these bundles.
And I think we can probably tweak this a little bit and resend out to the committee, so you all have, this is like it's like an addendum to your Build a Bond tool to help you how to program those.
All right, next up here, second to last, is the facilities reinvestment plus electrification. So had a $34 million request from General Services, and that ties to all the city buildings. So one of the more back-ended project requests out here. But with this request, we went through all of the mini projects and emphasized fire safety, sewer lines, any type of generator replacement, or boiler. To us was the most critical. It seems like all of those are very critical, really all.
That was really critical, perfect time.
Good reinvestment conversation.
Yeah, so it's really tough. There's high funding needs with all this, just how to fit it and how to make it fair across all the reinvestment categories. And so here it's roughly 18 million for those critical needs, the sewer line replacements and fire safety, and then another 8 million flagged for the 3 HVAC electrification projects that are currently still in consideration that merge with CASR's top requests for HVAC. That is Blair Caldwell, the Montbello Rec Center, and Denver Animal Shelter. So kind of higher dollar figure for these big HVAC electrifications, but if we do pass any of those three onwards, we should pay for the electrification as well.
Because the Denver Animal Shelter was a standalone.
Yes.
Okay.
And currently that dollar figure doesn't include electrification, so probably, yes. And so probably when we see the ordinance, it would be merging the electrification dollars into the animal shelter, but just dollar figures in different pots here.
So help me understand again. So some of this 17 million will also be added if those standalone projects are done. It would be elements of those standalone projects would be from this fund.
I think the intent here is, as we go through reinvestment projects holistically in the city, I think it is less about adding to specific standalone projects. I think it is more finding opportunities. I'll just kind of go back to the boiler example. Like, as we're replacing a boiler, we shouldn't just replace it with outdated technology. We should replace it with heat pumps if they're eligible. And so I think the real intent here in this funding is going through our facilities a little more holistically and applying those electrification savings, working with CASR, working with Dottie, who delivers a lot of these projects to identify those numbers.
So adding these to make those complete projects. And how much of this 17 million of that original, I'm looking at GS's list, because as I recall, it was somewhere in the 30-something million overall. So what you're doing is putting 17 million of the most critical ones. It's not everything that was on their list, but
yeah, and we could certainly go back to general services and be like, prioritize these, but they gave us a prioritized list and said everything is critical.
They did a very, right from the get-go, they did a great job of listing those. So this is responding to that, and it's not the whole enchilada, but it's a good part of it.
Correct, and really starting with what has the highest and greatest impact on life safety, and then kind of walking back from there. So your fire alarms, your sewers, I think from a both health and safety perspective, that's where we really wanted to start. Not to say the other things aren't important, but yeah, starting there.
Great, thank you. This is just what we needed.
Okay, and finally, streets and concrete. So it's paving, patching, and potholes, along with a lot of other concrete ingredients here. There's a lot going into this 20 million. The kind of simplest way is that currently we pave about 390 miles per year, and that is declining the pavement index, the condition. So it's not doing enough to actually supplement our full paving needs for the city.
Can you repeat that, please?
So 390 miles does not go far enough to avoid degradation of the roads. The goal would be 450 miles. That hits the target. And so 390 is what current CIP funding gives. So this proposal of 20 million adds an extra 10 to 20 miles per year. So it's still not getting to that 450, but it helps. And so, yes, it's just be increasing.
If anything that's critical in the city, it's streets and potholes, and everybody uses them and all that.
Incredibly critical. It's just a high dollar figure. So what else is going to come off the bond in order to increase this $20 million figure?
Or how much more should the city's annual budget include capital CIP?
Really good question.
That is going to be one of the questions. I mean, I think that was his question the very first day, which is, what should the CIP budget be every year to get this item plus a few others to the level where we're not declining in any of these, that we're, if nothing else, we're at least breaking even.
Yeah, at least not getting worse. I can speak a touch to the CIP, and this is exactly, I think we were talking about earlier about how does the 26 CIP cascade with the bond list. I think that's exactly the question. We as a preview, obviously the 26 budget still needs to go through mayor, will be before council in September. The CIP does seek to grow reinvestment dollars and grow investments in these types of programs like streets and concrete. If CIP won't get it all the way there, I will say. But yeah, hard to commit a specific dollar amount of what the CIP is going to do since we have to go through that process. But that is exactly what we'll try to do to try to align bond investments with CIP investments.
That's alignment, that's not the question of sufficiency. So the question, the long-term question is, when do we get to the level? And the answer would be, if we did that, it would cut operating costs, because that's general fund. And it would have ramifications for city workforce and actually who we can hire to get the work done. But I think it's the big question. Because we're gonna face this every single bond forever and ever until we get to a point where we're at least keeping up. The keep up dollars in our annual budgets has to match what we're doing every 6 years or 4 years with the bond.
Happy's absolutely right. The one thing we haven't talked about is what does it cost to the consumer? For example, I had a blowout, I had to replace not only the tire, but the rim. I won't tell you how much it cost. But for the average person who may not have a nice income, it's a lot of money. I don't think about that. Separate from the operating budget and all, it's the quality of life for the people of Denver. Anyway, something to think about.
And I'll say in Elevate, it's had $43 million allocated just for street paving and concrete. It was more of a transportation bond, but that helped a lot more than this $20 million request that we're putting in here. So any increase to this obviously helps dramatically to what we can be paved, but it has to come at a reduction to somewhere else. So just for your all's consideration. I made it through them all.
Yeah.
Well done.
Good job.
Really well done.
Yeah, it's a lot of information. We've spent an exhaustive amount of time really talking about this, and so a lot of information for you all to consider. Like I said, we'll send this out as well. I think consider it an addendum to your Build-A-Bond tool, and that will be refreshed as well. We'll include it does include that Smith and Sandown project, and we'll provide a little more granularity as to citywide how that gets used on the tool and how that gets
So could you tell me, just when we've gone through each of these separately, but what was, because we didn't have any of the citywides in our Build-A-Bond yet. So I'm prepared to gasp now because these seem modest along the way.
Yeah.
But I would like to have you add those up and tell me what overall these very modest additions in citywide amount to on the
You
overall.
bet. The modest additions are right now just under 107 million.
Okay.
We're working to keep it right around 100, just it's a nice round number.
Yeah.
But
I kind of figured it'd be around 100 million, so I'm not gasping.
That's
knowing
good.
that there's
Crazy is
fun,
that?
there's
It's
and again, I'll just encourage, I'll keep, again, think through the different priorities here. We recognize everything's important, but I think that those reinvestment needs, I think great conversation around paving. I think there's a variety of optionality here.
Can I ask the Build-A-Bond tool? I started to use it the other day and I lost it. Me. But how do we all work on this together? How's it going to work? At the end of the day, we all go through it with yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Then what happens?
I think we want to talk about that a little bit. I think ultimately, we take everybody's individual and as a group, we create one. You create one.
We started that the other day when
We
we
did
were
start
going
it
through
the
the
other
yes, no's, yes, no's.
I missed
Did
it.
you have it? We asked, did you have this on the list? And then
Sort of we're
X
building a
number of
collective.
us said yes, and so we kept it.
I missed it.
So it's another round of that, I think.
I think so too. There's a lot of refinement. There have been some things that have changed in terms of scope. There's been some scaling to some dollar amounts. There's the refinement to the citywides as well. So there's definitely, I think, we'll go
Would
through.
it be helpful to do a gut check, if I can use that expression, that says today, there are X number of projects that the majority of this committee has said yes to? Or is that too early to do that?
I think we already have that.
Oh, you do?
Isn't that what the in consideration list is?
I think you're somewhere in the 50-ish, probably a little bit less than that.
Number of projects?
Yeah.
Around 30.
I just went to the Build a Bond tool and it's now updated, I think, with just, at least at the top, just those in consideration, and that was the result of that exercise that we went through, which was keep this, keep, for now, keep this in consideration. So that's where we're at. We still have what we all agreed was in consideration still, and it's way more than we can afford still, so. And we just added 100 million.
Yeah, got it. Okay, thank you.
I propose, can we take just a 5-minute break and then come back and then talk a little bit through next steps and kind of what we're thinking on process? Maybe we can propose something and get folks' reactions. Does that make sense? Great.
Are we doing DPL?
Okay, so 10:15?
5 minutes.
And then are we gonna do DPL, because that was on the
DPL on the
agenda?
agenda.
Do you want to?
I'd like to see what their priorities are. Yeah.
Yes, they're priority.
Somebody here to present it, or is it just this?
We can get the libraries back online. We say 5, it's not 4.
5 to 7.
What if I say 10 and then 15, so.
7 minutes late, and I
But
came
unless
5 to
that's
10.
it.
You already done?
I'm gonna interrupt.
A student.
Sure.
We're doing this.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly what I was just saying, it's like.
We're getting closer.
The landing sounds.
I'd like to get it done. It should be good.
Yeah. That's so hard to say, and I was like, I remember that. He's like, everybody else, like, no.
No.
Did you revise it?
I texted.
And I think we had the numbers that I just shared.
Good.
We really captured right now.
Okay.
So.
Thank you, Brad. Yes, we could. Because he usually does use all caps.
That's what I said, I'm gonna.
It's just the same.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, that's fine.
Right?
So nobody's out there like, nobody's out there.
She's like, you need a yoga. Just prove it. He's like, this little form of government.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Lisa!
Yeah.
Amber just needs Amber saw the hires and the
Like literally since January, February, was really good. They're like on the tax.
You know.
Oh, that's good.
Is it like going out to like the
Yeah, out and then the last day turning on towards the game.
Oh, yeah, that's what you were saying yesterday.
Yeah.
That's not fun.
And there's a ton of that.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. Specifically. Okay.
So this is the
Jaguar.
There'd be no one left.
Yeah. Some should show up with us.
No.
Yes. That's for next week. She sent me that and I was like, hell yeah. So I was like, I told her that place.
That's pretty
Next week.
I may have, I know you go, I think.
I'm starting going there like once a week.
Or like, where.
I'm still.
Heart rate.
They go around it all the time.
It's usually when I'm there.
Yeah. And I'm like.
In between the bridges.
Royal Palm.
You can't stop. Yes. No, I actually got reminded me of like, that's what I mean, there, I don't know how to say. So I'm obsessed with farm Leo, like it's cute stuff.
Got cheetah print already.
I found like all
already.
kinds of stuff that I see in my car, but like this one's like Oh yeah, it's smelling like a pirate. This is also Jaguar, but it's
It's amazing, now I have.
I feel like anything Jaguar.
Yeah.
So they have sloth. Frost yourself. Sloth yourself.
Sorry.
It's so true. I save all these animal outfits because I just feel like. I got
You're out there like the gust of wind.
So I'm trying to do,
I know, that's why I wore the jacket. I know.
Another one.
We have talked about the chocolate on it.
You can start using it immediately.
Yeah, you want to, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
So you're really fortunate right there.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like 3 or 4 years. This is the one that's sort of famous for people. From Durango.
Purgatory.
Which is what I tried to do. I tried to do all 3 solo in like.
So I noticed that.
Like 45 minutes.
First time I ever noticed.
Yeah, you couldn't find anyone.
Try to do a solo, like a solo.
Oh,
Like a
yeah.
trailhead.
It's a place of,
We got like several rounds of.
Yeah, you should tell me that one. It's like, I thought when I did that one though, there was like for
Some people do.
passing enough time on that running in from purgatory. So like, I'm like, I will get out of your way. So I was like, being down for it.
Hi. Yeah. Look at my shoes. Correct. You guys can get that done.
Scheduled meeting to review that, please.
Absolutely. So you can do that, because I respond to that and treat that way.
I mean, I did like,
That's
I
it.
did it.
Season backpack.
You're unmuted. Okay, we are back in session. We're gonna take a couple of minutes to talk about next steps.
It's a good idea.
Started that conversation before the break, but I think we're gonna finish it now. Obviously, there's still a lot of information that you all are trying to incorporate into your decision making. One idea was to hold additional office hours next week. If you think that is helpful, you can sit with staff if you want to, if you need to, and kind of go through your build-a-bond. And then we would ask you to submit your build-a-bond to us, and we would incorporate everything. And then we come back and kind of talk about where we are together as a group at the next scheduled meeting, which is Monday, June 23rd. And we could think about doing a couple of different office hours next week, maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Submit your build-a-bonds individually, maybe by the end of the day, Thursday. And that gives the team Friday through the weekend to work on it, and then we come back on composite the 23rd. Something like that sound?
When did you want the build-a-bond due by?
I was gonna say close of business Wednesday.
There's a city holiday on Thursday.
Oh, there's a city holiday on
Yeah,
Thursday,
there's
that's
Juneteenth
right.
on Thursday.
Yes, and a lot of furlough days, a lot of people are taking the furlough day on Friday. So preferably by COB on Wednesday, if that's possible.
Okay.
Rashawn.
And that is the 18th?
Yes.
And
So
when are
office
these
hours
office
then
hours?
probably on Tuesday. Would make sense.
Yeah.
Monday,
We could
Tuesday?
do Monday, Tuesday, and be flexible with all of your schedules as well.
So if you're interested in office hours, should they email you,
Yeah.
Laura?
Yes, Patrick and myself, so
We're happy to do a couple of sessions too, if it doesn't work out with a specific calendar. We can find some time early next week.
So we'll send out an email and for all of your responses and just to start that chat, then in an email.
So I have a question. Federico wasn't at one of the meetings where we kind of went and did the build-a-bond.
Right.
So the build-a-bond that he probably might have access to on the share drive would look different than the original build-a-bond for the community, for the committee members. Do you want the original build-a-bond or the one that we worked from on Sunday?
Already worked. I think someone sent me the updated one, right?
Yeah, and I think just even based on the conversations from Tuesday and today, I think it'd be probably best to just make sure we do a really refined one and add in some of the scenarios and options that we just discussed for citywides, so that you all can fiddle around with that a little bit more, so.
Did you resend it out or we just go back to the one we have that's already updated?
Yeah, I think we just upload it into the SharePoint and then we'll kind of let you know it's ready, and then.
And can that have the scaled project amounts for some of the ones that we were following up on as well, that I know council's been asking about too?
Yes, and I was just gonna, to piggyback on what Nicole just said, we are also, as we've been doing all along, we're validating every single project cost as well as the scope. And it will also include the scalable options and what that scope includes as well. So, because I know there has been a lot of conversations about that scalability, and that's what that brings, what that scope brings. Great. So all of those cost numbers are being validated too.
When I go into my build-a-bond tool, you all get it? You don't?
So what we'll have you do, I think, is download a copy, and then you work in that sheet. You just email that back to us, and then we'll kind of condense all of that into kind of the master sheet that I think we can then review. That's what I'm hearing. Okay.
On the one online right now that we have access to, are the culturals all on there?
They're on there, yes. So I think you can continue to work in and kind of play around with it, because it has 95% of it. We just want to make sure we're reflecting the changes and direction of the committee, so.
And from the presentation on Tuesday, some culturals provided different numbers. Are those numbers reflected in?
They will be, yes.
They will be
Yes.
as of.
It all updated. Everything will be updated as of today, actually. So
Oh, as
after
of
this
like close of business
discussion,
today?
probably not close of business today.
Just wondering, so let me,
But based on the, oh, yes.
can I just refine my question? So as I'm looking at the build-a-bond tool, because if I download if I download the one right now, it would have different numbers. So when, just give me a time frame when I should download it to start working on it? Should I start downloading it on Saturday morning?
So absolutely, so.
Does that make
the one
sense?
up- Yeah, the one up there right now, I'm 95% sure has everything updated from Tuesday's meeting. I need to verify that.
Okay.
But then for today's, all of like incorporating the changes to citywide, because there are citywides on there, but not like the changes from the proposal that we just went over. That will need to be incorporated and uploaded.
Okay.
And that is something I will be working on right after this meeting.
Yep, and we did
can
wanna,
send it to you when that is updated.
yep, and we did wanna add a filter as well. I think, appreciate the direction from the committee as well about thinking about regional projects, like projects that have a regional impact, like the training center or some of the big bridges.
Yeah.
So we'll add that filter as well. That's just pulling down a formula, so that's quite easy. But yeah, there's just some little tweaks, so before you go downloading, we wanna make sure that's all ready to go for you all.
So to be safe, should we just download it tomorrow so that you all have to date? Because that's a lot preparing for like people to be out next Thursday. Just wanna make sure you all have enough time.
Do my best to get it done by end of day today.
Okay. So right now, this, I'm looking at this thing, and I can't see it because I don't have my glasses on. The one from Tuesday is what's in here, and it has yeses and TBDs. And so the yeses were the ones that we, at least at the, whatever we went through, collectively agreed upon.
Right.
And then the
Consideration.
The TBDs were the ones that were, so everything is in consideration. And this will be further refined.
Absolutely.
With some new numbers, like the numbers today, for example. Because the citywides aren't they're still in their original place in the tiers, on the list, not in the one nice neat little package like you presented today.
So all the original ones are included in the Build-A-Bond right now, but after the refinement and everything that we went through and that Ryan presented today, that has not yet been reflected on your tool.
And we'll have the
And they
actual
will-
dollar figures.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
on the Build-A-Bond, you have like the original dollars, so you can see where it started, and then we have a column with the adjusted ones.
Right.
Which is what we'll put in there, so you'll be able to see any changes and where it started.
Yellow highlighted.
Correct.
So for
Yep.
example, you'll see the streets paving program on there. What we're gonna do is we're gonna put it in at the number we just talked about, that's the 20 million. You can move that up, you can move that down, and then what Ryan just reviewed with all of you, that'll be a tab in that as well. So if you need to look back at that and see some of that information, that'll be there.
Okay, and what did we do with so the culturals still are not in here?
They're in there, but those are some of the TBDs because,
Okay.
yeah, so.
Okay. Okay, and we'll get updated figures on those as well.
So once we have all of that, and I go into this so that I do something by next Wednesday, do I go to the yes, no column and just I start having to put notes, right?
Correct, and we'll
This is way too much already.
Oh,
yeah, and so we'll sit with you, I don't think you were able to attend the office hours session, we walked through the tool, but basically you will put in your dollar amount, which can be a scaled figure or not, that's what we'll have in there, and then you can flip yes or no, and it'll auto-calculate as to how's that work against it. And that's a good use of office hours, so love to find some time early next week.
I need help with this, who do I call?
Leave us.
Oh,
Dennis.
I'll forward you.
But
Your technical support team.
when we put our stuff in here, you get it, or do we have to send it?
You will have to send
Yeah.
it to.
Okay,
I think
got it.
ideally download it, do all of your work, and then send it back to the team.
Okay,
And
save
then
it.
we will compile.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in an email that Evan sent out early on, I think all of your phone numbers are listed on there, right? Yeah.
Why don't we
include that in
re-up that
email.
with that info
Yeah.
when the tool is updated? Maybe we
That'd be
send an
great.
email and just say, hey,
Yeah.
here's who to call if you need help using it. We'll get all that in email.
Yeah, I was about to say, are the office hours gonna be just set and you go to a particular place, or?
We'll work with you. We'll, whatever works with your schedule, we'll make sure that it works for you.
Okay.
And
So-
sorry to interrupt, I think what we could do, why don't we just, when we send out that email update, we'll just send you a static copy of it, so when you open it in your email, that is downloaded, so you don't need to go through and download it off the SharePoint, just get the email, open it, work on it, send it back to us.
Save it.
Well, I'll give it.
Save it, yeah, save it onto your desktop or what have you, yeah.
And then you'll just, I mean, it's easier to me if you just give us one place to call to set up office hours.
Yes, we will include that in the email. Yep.
Look at me.
Your cell phone.
Your cell formulas and.
Hey, that doesn't hurt.
That'll be on Monday and Tuesday.
Yes.
We can have options into Wednesday too.
That would be very helpful.
Perfect. Are we ready to move on to the library?
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. Emily, do you have the prioritized list? I just had it up, but I just lost it. Yes, I can. I printed mine. I can get it too.
So you could actually.
Email yesterday, yeah. Hi, did you find it before me? I did. Now whether or not I can share it for you.
Yeah.
Maybe. All of us?
Do you want me to pull it? I have it.
Do you have it up? Yes. Sharing's hard.
Winner, chicken dinner. Let's go. Okay. I think, please,
This, I believe this is it.
okay, great.
I try to edit it in my head this morning.
And we do have libraries online as well. I'm just seeing, who do we have online from library?
Teresa and Tony.
Hello, Teresa. Yeah.
Hi.
So, Teresa, do you just want to quickly go through this, your prioritization for the executive committee?
Sure. So our top priorities, I would say, are the Blair Caldwell, Montbello, Central, Bear Valley, and Decker. I know that when we went through these, we gave specifically the age of each location, if they were Carnegie, the comprehensiveness of the renovations that are needed. We also put forward the co-locations at East Colfax and Gateway. I mean, at Chaffee Park, I'm sorry, and then Gateway, the new branch that would be located out there near the Cultural Embassy. Northfield, I think, was low priority. I think it's a new location and there's going to be more work that needs to happen to bring that to fruition. I don't know how much in depth you want us to go with each one, but Tony's on and he could give real specifics on each one if you'd like. So just let me know how much you want us to talk about each one of these.
And so for this committee, we did include for each of the projects, we included the renovation. So for those that had a renovation and an addition, we included the cost of the renovation as well as broke out the addition. So again, to get to that scalability as well. While the preference from library would be for, like, for instance, number 7, the renovation of Decker includes that addition. But there could be, the renovation is just that 4.4 million, whereas the renovation would be an additional 3. So there is some of those options for scaling as you go through. And you can also see the age of each, if it's 30-year-old infrastructure and spaces. And so you can see the age and the description of each one as well.
So how do we, who's on the line?
Teresa.
Yes.
Teresa, this is Federico. Teresa, question. So you've got 11 listed as priority, but you just said that Blair, Montbello, Central, Bear, and Decker are the priorities for the first list. And then you've got the 4 at the bottom, which are new. How do we think of, so are the new not priorities, just nice to haves, or how do we think about this?
They're nice to have, but we have serious concerns at some of these locations above, and that's why I wanted to put forward our current existing buildings and just explain that there are serious issues that we need to address in some of these locations. the age of these buildings and some of the work that needs to be done. If we don't do it, we will lose the building. Whereas absolutely, we'd love to have a new location on East Colfax and Chaffee Park that would be attached to housing. And yes, we think those are great, but we also have to figure out what we're going to do if we don't put the ones at the top forward on the bond and we don't get the bond, what we're gonna do with those locations that are city assets.
So bottom line is, you've identified 5 that are your priorities.
And Teresa, please correct me if I'm incorrect, but they're listed in priority order, correct?
They are, we reprioritize them for the team on Monday. And then the only thing I think we need to talk about is line 4 is deferred maintenance for Central. I know Central had been originally put forward as a huge package, and then we were asked to break it out, and we broke it down to special collections, as you could see on line 3. On line 4 is the deferred maintenance. On line 5 is the Idea Lab. And then on line 9, priority 9 is the gallery space. So we did break that out further and took away that 80 million cost as a lump sum.
You shared with us last night with Evan, is this list in our email?
It is. This
Yeah.
list is in your email.
It was sent
That's
to us
correct.
in our, yeah.
Okay, that's correct.
So I'm still confused. So let's go, the number you use on the chart, let's use those. So number 1 is a priority, number 2 is a priority, number 3 is a priority. 4?
It's a priority, it's deferred maintenance, but it's a priority for us if we don't do that work. Yeah.
I see that, but you just listed 5 at the beginning. So 5 is also a priority, 6 is a priority, and 7 is a priority, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Got it. I have Teresa, I have a question about the central library items, because they're huge. And I'm trying to figure out, because the library just underwent a huge project from the last bond and Elevate, right?
Yes.
And how much was that?
$43 million.
Okay, so my question is, was that all deferred maintenance, and how did we end up with a project that big and not addressing, like, these are gonna fall down if we don't do a deferred maintenance? I'm struggling with how we ended up with this much more deferred maintenance. And I do notice that it says infrastructure and spaces. And so I thought additions, so help me understand, because I'm struggling with the criticality of these entire packages here.
And Teresa, before you answer that, because I think I have a good add-on to Happy's question, is special collections really more important or a higher priority than the deferred maintenance line? That 3-4, that seems, I'm just wondering about the urgency of each. So if you could tag on a response to that, to Happy's question, that'd be helpful too.
Absolutely. And so, first of all, I just want to jump in and say that I'm interim and I'm new. So I have some knowledge. And I've questioned everything just as much as you all to make sure that these are our priorities. But Tony, who is the one who absolutely has to manage all these facilities, can explain the difference. And I would like Tony to jump in here. And Tony, you can explain what was done on that first renovation of Central and what was left out. I think he's here. I thought he was here. There he is. Tony? I could see you.
Is he online?
He's online, but he's not responding, so I will, I'll jump in then. Tony, can you?
I have one question before, as we try to find Tony, maybe he had to use the facilities. Do we have in all of the information that we were given. We have this current that Evan sent us yesterday. Do we have how much they were in the last bonds? Do we have like an Excel doc? Because we have Excel docs. We have in a doc that showed how much the culturals got in the last two bonds in the 2017 and Rise 2021. Do we have that same doc for Central? Does that make sense?
Yeah, we can.
Because that's easy for me, like that's how my brain works is I go back to see, so that's what I've been doing with a lot of the culturals, is looking at their investment and want to make sure that if we're investing, that they're also talking about, to Happy, to your point, and Federico, deferred maintenance. I think that's what you just asked for the library, right? And we have meals dedicated. We have a couple when the voters passed. So I want to just make sure that as we're leveraging bond dollars, that we're also not adding new infrastructure that would also add more to deferred maintenance, right? So that could be helpful.
So what I'm hearing, so you would like a list of library projects that were in Elevate and Rise?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Because you did that for the culturals and that's been super helpful. I referenced that doc a lot.
69.
We're here.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Sorry about that. My microphone wasn't working, probably due to overuse. My name is Tony Kaufman. I'm the Facilities Management Director of the Denver Public Library. To answer your question about the Central Library, Central Library is the largest public library building between Chicago and Los Angeles at 540,000 square feet. It will have a level of rolling renovation just because it's cost prohibitive and challenging to maintain some level of business operation if all of the building was done all at once. The areas that were completed were focused mostly on public spaces on the first and second floors, with additional infrastructure that serves our public, like the elevators, and we added elevators. And then we, of course, all the accessibility that would be modernized as part of building code and ADA standard here in the modern era. The areas that weren't covered are the ones that we put forward. In special collections and the other areas are all 30 plus years old, just based on the nature of life cycle and just standards and asset management. Things that are past 20 years in a high traffic building tend to be deferred. And so all the deferred maintenance is also embedded in the spaces that weren't recently renovated. And just for a few examples, it's all of the HVAC, it's the lighting, it's the electrical wiring, it's the fire alarm system, plus all the finishes. And so all of these things come together to produce a built environment that allows us to house these rare materials. We have over $42 million worth of very, very rare treasures in the Western History Collection, as well as other artifacts that are one of a kind. And they require an ambient environment that is required by the National Archives in order for those materials to not decay, degrade, and for us to preserve history and identities. In addition to that, there's deferred maintenance with the structure of the building, and that's related to our roofs and our facade, which need additional care just based on the nature of their construction and age.
Hey, Tony, this is Federico. Quick question. So 2 or 3 years from now, are you going to come back with another list of additional maintenance?
Yes, there will be ongoing renovations. We'll also need to find supplementary funding in order to tackle some of those items that are 30 years old, so it doesn't disrupt business operations, or so we don't have to close floors. There's another element to this, and that's just the fact that because it's our headquarters and our flagship facility, it houses most of our staff. That staff affects the whole system. And that system, of course, is of 28 and counting facilities, as we have services and materials and collections here that we share throughout our system to benefit our community. The Central Library serves all of Denver as well, in that it isn't just the Golden Triangle neighborhood, of course, on the immediate level, but it really serves the whole city and county and is a destination for travelers. It's very well known and a real busy place.
I guess what I'm asking, Tony, is the increase that you're going to request in 2 or 3 years, will it be larger than what you're asking for now? When do we catch up, I guess is what I'm asking.
Great question. And so, yeah, and you know, I would say there's a renovation cycle for busy public libraries like this every 15 to 20 years. And so really being prepared based on the cost of ownership to invest will allow us to make sure that our doors are open and that we're operating as efficiently as possible. So we could quantify what the rest of the building would be, but we're also looking to see if we can supplement whatever the bond can produce for us so we can capture more areas, particularly staff areas. As part of the subcommittee, as a subject matter expert, it was a request that we focused on public spaces, which I think is absolutely appropriate and wonderful, is that's the basis of our purpose and mission. And so really also making sure that all the support services and staff that work hard in the background also have modernized ventilation, lighting, and workspaces is something we're going to look to see if we can bring to the table as part of this.
I have one additional question. I think we talked about this before, but refresh my memory, because the library just got a new authorization for a mill. And do I remember the correct answer, which is we're not dedicating any of those mills to any of our capital needs? And if that is the answer, I didn't get to the why of that.
Yes, thank you for that question. The 2I fund, the DPL fund, is used for both operating and capital. The library does invest in these city-owned assets in order for our business operations to sustain, and then also to be mission aligned with the air quality that we want, the lighting quality that's appropriate for public libraries, our collections, and our staff. We have been supplementing bond projects in the current bond phases, and it would be our expectation that we would continue to do so, but it needs to supplement just based on its design and the wording of the mill levy. And just the limitations of it. It wasn't specifically designed to handle this amount of real estate by itself, and is just a way to basically boost other funding sources and really have a bond stack. We have a model that we created, and I'm going to use the Athmar location as that is going to reopen very soon. And it was a combination of bond funding, CIP funding, FIT funding, and DPL funding that really delivered a comprehensive facility. I like to say that we delivered generational facilities, meaning that obviously we're very free and open to everyone, super busy, and really anchors in the community. By our nature, we're anti-displacement, and we're really preserving and making sure that culture can be something that can be activated and retained in each community. And in order to do that, of course, we have to operate 6 or 7 days a week, long hours, and have buildings that can handle heavy wear and tear, but also that don't close, because we have to serve as warming and cooling centers in extreme weather. And so our systems need to be robust, well-maintained, and renewed at the right interval. And so in order to do that, we look for any funding source to make sure that that can happen.
How much does the mill raise annually?
Approximately $32 million.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Tony. This is Council President Sandoval. I have a question. How do you have a robust tool that has all of your assets in one consolidated way? So you're like, you can plan for deferred maintenance. The airport just came out with a great tool, and they put like their elevators and everything, and so then they can plan, capital plan for deferred maintenance, so it doesn't always have to rely on a bond. What's the library's approach to deferred maintenance in a more comprehensive way than relying just on bond?
Yes, great question. So the Denver airport here is actually an industry benchmark for how to do this right. And we are in the plans and making plans in the future to make sure that we have that level of technology and also the talented people that would build and operate such a system. Basically, it's an asset management system. We're using an older one that the city uses, but the one that the airport uses actually has more technology that can help us understand the health of building components more in real time, just based on service intervals, but all the technology that gets embedded into modern systems can actually talk back and tell you how it's doing. And so based on actually more real-time data, we will be able to do that. I will tell you, generally speaking, it's that 15 to 20-year window. All the major infrastructure systems are simply designed to function within that time frame. And so it'll just help us refine and really understand if something's not going to make that window, first and foremost, because again, business continuity is a big goal in this, making sure that our doors are open and our business operations are really maintained and sustained at all times. Displacing staff's expensive, of course, as well. But public service excellence starts with having your doors open and making sure that all the services that we are obligated to have are wide open for the public, because that's what they've invested in and that's what they really want.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, yes, we want to get better at refining and having data for backup. We do have some already. And we also use facility condition assessment data and just the intellectual capital from all of our subject matter experts. We got awesome skilled trades and other planning, design, and construction experts that really help us understand the performance of equipment. And we do log its historic performance to see where it's at in terms of actual reliability. But yes, thanks for asking that. And that's best practice. That's where we're headed. That's part of what the DPL fund is investing in, is our opportunity to get to that level of best practice. And we're in motion with that right now.
So to answer in a quicker way, do you have like a percentage set aside every year? Like 25% of your operating, like your balance sheet, like, you know, you work on your balance sheet. Do you have like a certain amount dedicated to deferred maintenance? I understand like the airport, I love their system. I think it could be advanced throughout the city. I'm just wondering how much of your operating budget goes towards deferred maintenance. I think that's what the committee is asking and would be helpful to understand.
So upon my arrival, which is about 2 years ago, and my role as newly created part of the DPL fund, along with others like Teresa's, et cetera. And so upon my arrival, I found a portfolio that's about a third of it's deferred, which is extreme. Less than 10% should be deferred, and that costs less in so many different ways. And so how investing in capital affects operations, and it's a real opportunity to help us solve some of our operating budget issues, is the deferred maintenance has a compounding effect. Not only does it age with time, but the parts are no longer available. Things break down. The consumption of energy and therefore the production of extra carbon emissions are all embedded in the deferred maintenance. So what we're doing is we're digging out, and we need to make these pretty aggressive, intense catalytic investments in order to catch up. We had 68 days of closure last year. I've never seen anything like that, with over 30 years of experience and really someone whose career was started as a teenager in public service. So really at some point, what we're doing is reducing that high percentage of deferred maintenance to something that's more manageable. And we're using every and any resource we possibly can and really having that long-termism built in. As we get through that and stabilize the portfolio with its deferred maintenance, we will be able to use what's called capital smoothing. And that's going to allow us to have much more pinpointed investments that are more predictable. But really, still over time, things will still follow that 15 to 20-year major renovation cycle, just based on how often these places are operating, how long things are designed to last, and how intensely we use the buildings.
So to answer your question, the DPL fund has only been 2 years in our possession. And we put aside money every year, a certain percent of the money. We will get you that specific number, but we don't have anything concrete yet that can actually sustain all of these buildings. We're going to, yes, have to come every year, every time there's a bond initiative in order to maintain these buildings. The infrastructure is not there for us to maintain them with the general fund and the DPL fund.
Tony, this is Federico again. So if we go with the top 7 priorities, when does Valdez, Gallery Space, Woodbury, and Park Hill, when and how do they get funded?
The gallery space is important. It's something that, again, we'd have to look for supplementary funding from different sources. We have, our Friends Foundation that can fundraise for us, of course. We have the CIP fund through the city that we can allocate for these things. And then the other areas are, the Woodbury and Park Hill are Carnegie buildings. And of course, they're very important. They have a level of stabilization because the city did invest in the weatherproofing, we'll just say, so roofing mainly, and they are going to need care later on in the bond cycle. But we think that we can use a combination of of capital stack funds that would include CIP, potentially fundraise, and then DPL fund based on our reserves. Those buildings toward the end of the list are a little bit more stable and less susceptible to failures. Their infrastructure's either a little bit newer and can hang on, they still make parts for it, but it also isn't degrading as fast as some of the other areas.
Got it, thank you.
But my question for you, Tony, is Woodbury Library, that's a renovation of inside. So same as Smiley Library. Woodbury, yes, for deferred maintenance, but it hasn't been touched the inside basically my whole 46 years of life. So isn't this request like a renovation of an old inside building that hasn't been updated?
Do you believe Woodbury? So Woodbury's about 100 years old or so. And so it's had, I think, what I'll call a mid-cycle interior refresh. And that is less intrusive. It's still capital in terms of cost, but it's not as extensive. It would be more hundreds of thousands than it would be in the millions. And that would include your finishes, your carpet, your paint, et cetera. Maybe some reconfiguration of shelving just to accommodate how we're providing services and or how the collection's presented. And then, so yeah, that's something that we actually do more on a 7 to 10 year cycle. Is something that would be included in these renovations. That's why I call it mid-cycle refresh, because if 15 to 20 is that major reno that we're asking for on these, and 7 to 10 would be when we hit those finishes again. They just wear out. And so at some point, yeah, that kind of explains where Woodbury and Park Hill is. I think they were upgraded a little bit more recently than the others and or are just wearing a little bit better. And so it really just depends on what was achieved by our predecessors. And how the building's just being affected by everything from usage to Mother Nature to just time.
So to answer the original question that came up of how much money came out of RISE and Elevate, Elevate was 69.34 million, RISE was 29.2 into the library system, so a total of 98.5 and change.
That was pre-2I.
And was that all central or was it across the system?
That was across the system. Central was 43.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. All right. So I think we have our marching orders. We'll get the Wednesday. I'm glad you said it, Gabby, not me. Once we get the finalized build a bond, it will be in our email. Thank you for making it so you don't have to download it. I'll just open it. Some of those projects that the citywide projects will be on there. If you don't see a project on there, maybe, and it got taken off, maybe we could just email you and say, hey, I don't see it. Can it be added somehow from the original bond? And then we'll see everyone. Have a nice week off to process all this. Are there any last questions?
So could I, to the point that you just made, at the risk of, I think you did it the first time with different tabs. So would it be possible to include the original tab on the build a bond? But then you're sending us by separate email the latest, so that because there were a lot of I remember going through with my yeses and no, now I don't even remember what they are, and now it's gone, so I didn't. Well, maybe I did save it separately.
I'm not sure if you necessarily have the individual ones that you guys may have worked on with different yeses and nos. The original dollars and values in there from like the very first meeting, that's all in there in static and hasn't changed. We will update in like the separate column that's bright yellow. We'll update the dollars in there so you'll be able to see the differences.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah, and we'll have like reference tabs in there as well with information. Sorry, Laura.
And happy to walk through any at office hours or any questions you have.
Yep, absolutely.
I'm getting.
Alright, thanks,
We're
everybody.
here for you all, so please reach out. We'll make sure everybody has phone numbers and everything, but please use us.
Mayor has to decide.
We get whatever information you need.
Thanks, guys.
Great job, everybody.